The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. We're reading today from the Thom Hartmann Reader here at Thom Hartmann University. This is from page 13. The title is The Story of Carl. Carl loved books and he loved history. After spending 2 years in the Army as part of the American occupation forces in Japan immediately after World War II, Carl was hoping to graduate from college and teach history, perhaps even at the university level, if he could just hang on to the GI Bill and his day job long enough to get his PhD. But in 1950, when he'd been married just a few months, the surprise came that forced him to drop out of college. His wife was pregnant with their first child. This was an era when husbands worked, wives tended the home, and being a good father and provider was one of the highest callings to which a man could aspire. Carl dropped out of school, kept his 9-to-5 job at a camera shop, got a second job at a metal fabricating plant, working with molten metal from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. For much of his wife's pregnancy and his newborn son's first year, he slept 3 hours a night and caught up on the weekends. But in the process, he earned enough to get them an apartment and prepare for the costs of raising a family. Over the next 45 years, he continued to work in the steel and machine industry. In the later years, as a bookkeeper manager for a Michigan tool and die company, as 3 more sons were born. Carl knew he was doing the right thing when he took that job in the factory, and he did it enthusiastically. Because the auto industry was unionized, he found he was able to support his entire family, all 4 sons, on one paycheck. He had a fully funded health insurance program, an annual vacation, and a good pension waiting for him when he retired. Carl had become a member of the middle class. He may not have achieved his personal dream of teaching history, but he had achieved the American dream. He was self-sufficient and free. Working with molten metal can be dangerous, but the dangers were apparent, and Carl took every protection to protect himself so that he could return home safely to his family. What he didn't realize, however, was that the asbestos used at the casting operation was an insidious poison. He didn't realize that the asbestos industry had known for decades that the stuff could kill, but would continue to profitably market it for another 20 years while actively using its financial muscle to keep the general public in the dark and prevent the government from interfering. A couple of years ago, Carl tripped on the stairs and ended up in the hospital with a compression fracture of his spine. He figured that fall had also caused the terrible pain he'd been experiencing in his abdomen and his chest. Doctors, however, discovered that his lungs were filled with mesothelioma, a rare form of lung cancer that is almost always caused by exposure to asbestos. Mesothelioma is terminal, and its victims die by a slow and painful suffocation. Just because some corporation put profit before people, Carl got screwed. I was Carl's first child. My dad faced a painful death, but at least his job in a union shop left him with health care after retirement. Most Americans don't even have that reassurance anymore. More than 45 million Americans don't have health insurance to cover expenses for a serious illness, and 5 million lost their health insurance between 2001 and 2005, which is when I wrote this. And it's not just illness that worries most Americans today. Americans are working more and making less, getting harder and harder to just get by. There's a reason for the pain Americans are suffering. The America my dad grew up in put people or profits. The America we live in now puts profits above people. In my dad's America, 35% of working people were union members who got a living wage, health insurance, and defined benefit pensions. These union benefits lifted all boats because they set the floor for employment. For every union job, there was typically a non-union job with similar pay and benefits, meaning roughly 70% of the American workforce back then could raise a family on a single paycheck. People who were disabled and couldn't work could live on Social Security payments, and the elderly knew that they would have a safe retirement, paid for by pensions, Social Security, and Medicare. The gap between the richest and the poorest had shrunk rather than widened. That America is disappearing fast. The minimum wage is not a living wage. Workers are now expected to pay for their own health insurance and their own retirement. Pension plans are disappearing. 30,000 General Motors employees lost theirs just in 2005, and there's continued talk about privatizing Social Security, the Republicans' grand goal. The safety net is ripping apart, and the results are that the middle class is shrinking. The rich are once again getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. The inflation-adjusted average annual pay of a CEO went up from $7.7 million to $9.6 million just between 2002 and 2004. Meanwhile, from 2002 to 2004, the inflation-adjusted median annual household income went down from $46,058 to $44,300. In other words, ordinary people's income went down by $1,600, while CEO pay went up by $1.8 million a year. From 2001 to 2005, America has lost 2,800 manufacturing jobs just in 3 years. If you don't count jobs produced by the military-industrial complex, the number of private sector jobs created since 2001 decreased by 1,160,000. Although 67% of large employees, well, you get where we're going with this. Anyhow, it's the Thom Hartmann Reader.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, who just today flew from Berlin to Svalbard, above the Arctic Circle, and that's where the Doomsday Seed DNA Bank is located and supported by the Norwegian government. And he wanted to just let everybody know where he is in his. He's working on a documentary on climate change, and he notes that the fjords are melting at a shocking rate right now, which is wreaking havoc on his trip and on the production. So you're stuck with me for a few more days here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Luckily, it's a very slow news week, so I feel like, we have that at least. Clearly, that's not true. And just yesterday, there was a bombshell. It's very difficult to really highlight the magnitude, the enormity of what just happened yesterday. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that Donald Trump fired Comey, the head of the FBI, which is conducting an active investigation into seemingly the president and his campaign and their connections, collusions, or what with Russia. And President Trump fired him yesterday with a completely ridiculous and unbelievable reasoning that he gave. Again, it's just such a huge story. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it, which is why I'm extremely happy that I have Rep. Mark Pocan from the great state of Wisconsin on the phone with me to maybe help me figure out what's going on with this story and how it impacts everything else happening today. Mark Pocan, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, glad to be here, Alex.
So you heard my intro. It's just it's a lot. There's a lot going on. So do you have any insights into this that you'd like to share with our audience here?
Well, we've talked about this, pretty much every week that I've been on Tom's program. There's been more and more that just keeps dripping out around the Russian involvement with our elections. I mean, that is an unequivocal fact at this point. 17 intelligence agencies have put out reports saying that, the parts that were made public and some that hasn't yet been. But what I think we keep finding out, thanks to a lot of really good journalism that's out there, is we're finding more and more people involved with the Trump campaign, with the Trump administration, even the Trump family. When Jared Kushner met with the Russian ambassador, kind of in a non-front door way over at Trump Tower. I mean, just when you start looking at all of the information that's out there, and then you see something like this, first a couple justice officials were let go who were involved in some sort of capacity around this issue, and now the director of the FBI for the most ridiculous of offered reasons. It's just at a point where now we're seeing serious Republicans starting to say, look, this is hitting, special prosecutor territory. Not all Republicans, clearly, but I think you're finding those more independent ones who, are just looking at this going, you just can't look at something like this. And while the FBI is investigating you, you fire the director. It just seems so unbelievable that it does seem unbelievable, maybe because it is unbelievable.
So I just am reading a tweet from a reporter who said she asked John McCain who he wants to see as the next director of the FBI, and his response was a select committee, which I think that shows where some people are on the discussion. Where we are, to me, is we're long past the point where an independent prosecutor, a special prosecutor, it's just the only way that the American people can at all be satisfied that what needs to be done for an investigation of this magnitude is being done free of political interference. Do you feel like the Democrats are unified in a position around that?
I'm certainly starting to hear Democrats say that there should be no confirmation of a new FBI director until they get the special prosecutor, because to me that is an absolute must, and I would encourage them to go that route. We have got to get this in place. And quite honestly, if Donald Trump has nothing to do with any complicit activity, his campaign, his administration, himself, then he should welcome this as well to clear the air so he can move ahead. But, let's face it, he's had a administration on training wheels. They're not accomplishing a whole lot. The only thing they've been able to accomplish so far now seems to be this awful health care bill that 24 hours ago was what everyone was talking about. And now all of a sudden the conversation shifted for the newest travesty within this administration. If President Trump is serious and not having anything to do from his campaign or any level around complicity with what the Russians did, this would be what could clear the air for him so he could move forward. So it's a time that we just have to force this, and I hope the Senate Democrats do force this issue.
So speaking to the grassroots, I feel like right now it's crystallized on this one. There's just no... I feel like the calls have to be clear, clarion, and just hammer Senate offices right now that without a special prosecutor, there is going to be no movement on anything else. I feel it's the validity of almost everything is questioned now. It's questionable. It's difficult for me to, Mitch McConnell, I believe, said something around the president can fire whoever he wants. Now let's get back to business. That's not true. The president of the United States has to answer to the same laws that you or I or any other citizen of the United States has to answer to. And that's one of the things that makes America America. And until we see a special prosecutor, I don't feel like we're seeing a valid kind of setup for moving on any other legislative priority or any of other priority that the president might have.
No, I agree, Alex. If he fired Comey because of the investigation, that's obstructing justice.
Right.
Maybe what we need at this point is an impeachment clock, like we have a doomsday clock, because I think yesterday we moved an hour closer. And I think that people have got to keep every option on the table to make this administration do the right thing. And if I was someone right now in a district, I would be calling my elected officials saying, support a special prosecutor publicly, or within the next week do a town hall and explain why you won't. And I think it's got to be that clear and that definitive to make sure that people are being accountable.
Representative Mark Pocan from the great state of Wisconsin. It's just hard to like say, oh, well, what else is going on when they're, but it's just, that seems to be the world that we're in. I thought that Monday was this really heavy news day. And then, so I know there are a lot of other things going on. You mentioned Trump Care and the travesty of the bill. And I think it's a tragedy because if that bill were to become law, there would be loss of life over it. It would be, it would rip health care away from people, millions, tens of millions of people, raid Medicare, destroy Medicaid, all to give massive tax cuts to the wealthy. And 217 Republicans voted for it. And now they're ducking their constituents at home, and because they know this vote is toxic that they just took. So what are you seeing?
Travesty. That's the real travesty, that 14 of the 217 people who voted for this thing are doing town halls this week, and the other 203 people are ducking their constituents. And I did 2 town halls on Monday in 2 parts of my district. 80% of what we talked about, that people came to talk about, was the health care bill. They're concerned that they're going to lose health care. People didn't like the bill when it first came out. It got even worse, and that's the bill they passed, and people are truly concerned about this. So, one of the things that I'm doing, working with the groups like PCCC and Indivisible and others, in a group in Kenosha, Wisconsin, my hometown, called Forward Kenosha, that just started in January. They have 1,700 followers on Facebook already in a town of about 100,000 people. They invited Paul Ryan and I to do a town hall this Friday in Paul's district. Paul declined, but I did not. So I'm going there Friday. I'm going to explain the bill because I think people need to hold your members of Congress accountable. My mom lives there. My cousins live there. My classmates from high school live there, and their children and their grandchildren. I don't think it's fair that he's going around the country raising money from billionaires for Republicans across the country instead of talking to his constituents about an awful health care bill he's put forward.
And I really like that tactic, and I hope that more Democrats, and I could even see candidates for office taking that up, that if the Republican members are going to duck their constituents, which, I think we can be straightforward on that. What they're really saying there is they're gambling that they can skate through, keep their jobs because the money will keep flowing in because of the vote that they took. And if they just duck their constituents, they'll still have full bank accounts to run their campaigns. And so it's literally a choice. They chose Wall Street, big insurance, big pharma money over the people. I love the idea of Democrats sitting into town halls when the Republicans won't face their constituents, who, let's be straightforward on that as well, are their bosses. And
Alex, if this bill was as good as they're claiming it is, you know how Washington works. Everyone would go around to every town in their district to brag about what they just passed. The fact that 203 of them are afraid to talk to their constituents tells you what an awful health care / giant tax cut for the wealthy bill that really was.
So last 30 seconds here, Representative Mark Pocan. Anything else that the grassroots should be focused on, or just words of encouragement and wisdom for them?
Yeah, I'll tell you, this movement around town halls, I think, is important. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, you have to be accountable to your constituents. If you're not, then, people have to make their elected officials be accountable. I know it's a bumper sticker, but I used to have it on my car. If the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. This is on us to make sure that we're holding them accountable.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program. Representative Mark Pocan from the great state of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Alex.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Still with us on the phone, Representative Mark Pocan. Representative, are you still with us on the phone?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Sorry, that was my
No worries.
my outro sounded like it was over, but you're staying with us, and we're going to take a call if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to Vince in California. Vince, you're on the line with Representative Mark Pocan.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I was just curious because I keep hearing the term special prosecutor thrown around, throughout the mainstream media and all the news channels, and in fact yourselves. And I'm just curious, what crimes have the Trump administration been charged with that you would need a special prosecutor to prosecute?
It's a good question,
Sure.
Vince, but and I think Representative Mark Pocan can answer what a special prosecutor actually does.
Well, and what I'm arguing, Vince, is we need someone who has the independence to actually get into this investigation, because clearly 17 intelligence agencies have put together a report talking about this collusion with the election, or talking about the Russian involvement in the election. Clearly, there's a bunch of evidence around collusion that we're trying to get to the bottom of so that the administration can move forward. But because quite honestly, in the House Intelligence Committee, watching the chair, Nunez, and what he did, he had to recuse himself. And we've had Attorney General who's had to recuse himself. And because of that, we need to have somehow getting to the bottom of this in an objective way. So we wanted an independent investigation, but at this point, the best way to do it so that someone can't just arbitrarily fire someone who's doing it is you have a special prosecutor, and that's going to be the cleanest, best way to get it done.
So that is actually the function of the special prosecutor, is an independent body, an independent person who with investigatory power, this is, we've seen this in the past. The idea is to make it above political interference. And so since
Absolutely.
we've seen so much political interference now, and, time after time after time, there's been people, how could somebody actually, investigate something if they know that they're investigating, basically their boss who could fire them at any moment? And that's the idea of this independent investigator.
Exactly. And, with what just happened, what kind of a message was just sent after two people from the Justice Department earlier were fired who were involved at some level of investigation, and now the director of the FBI has been fired? Clearly, the message from the White House has been, if you investigate this, you're asking to find another job. And that's why we need to have this special prosecutor, independent counsel to come in to investigate and see if there needs to be any prosecution on it. But we're not, that's what they're there to investigate. So I think Vince's question is, it's not that they're there to automatically prosecute. They're there to investigate if there is a reason to. There's certainly been plenty of circumstantial and other evidence from our intelligence communities that's worth looking at. And because Congress has, let's face it, failed on this, we more than ever need a special prosecutor to get involved.
Representative Mark Pocan from the great state of Wisconsin, sticking with us to the end of the hour on the Thom Hartmann Program, to the end of the half hour, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, and still with us on the phone, Representative Mark Pocan. Representative Pocan, you want to take another call?
Sure.
Let's do it. Let's go to Dion in Illinois. Dion, you're on the line.
Yes, my question for the congressman is, What is yours and your party and constituents' red line for you guys to impeach Trump?
Well, Dion, I think the red line is more the fact that we have to get a majority of votes in Congress, which means the Republicans are in the majority. They have to be able to vote to move impeachment forward. So we have to have something that's so solid that you can get Republican votes, because even if you had every single Democrat vote for impeachment, you wouldn't have enough votes. So it has to be something that goes with such a strong preponderance of information and facts, which is why we need a special prosecutor so that can actually come out of this investigation, because it's been stymied by from the Attorney General to the head of the Intelligence Committee in the House. That's the level we have to get. So you have to have Republican votes, because they're in the majority, to actually have impeachment and prove that there's a crime. Special prosecutor will help either clear the air or find that there may be something that brings us to that level.
And the other way forward would be in 2018 to get a Democratic majority if the facts are there that they could proceed on, would be, the other path forward on that.
Because and nothing is fast, as you know, Alex, right? So, I mean, part of it is just getting to the point we can have a prosecutor. That could be a very long process, but I guarantee more and more information is going to come out about Russian involvement, and I'm guessing very strongly that you're going to see more actions around complicity with either people from the campaign or otherwise in the Trump world, and that's what we have to continue to collect that information. But, if he's going to keep stymieing it and firing the FBI director who's investigating him, that raises, again, like I said, if there was an impeachment clock, we just moved an hour closer.
So, Representative Pocan, we got a couple minutes here, and CNN broke the story minutes after Comey was fired. They were working on it, and then Comey's firing actually pushed it to publish that there is a grand jury in Virginia that was impaneled in this investigation. That we know there are ongoing investigations. That's a huge part of the story. That's why we need a special prosecutor, because we know that there are investigations that are ongoing, and we know we've already seen political interference multiple times.
Absolutely. And, for Kellyanne Conway to say somehow it's inappropriate for us to talk about the timing of the need for this, I mean, that's a more subterfuge. I mean, bottom line is they rushed this decision. It took them a long time to fire Flynn. They rushed this decision, and there's a reason why they rushed the decision. And they didn't even tell him. He found out from watching it on TV in the background and thought it was a joke at first when people mentioned it to him. This is such an amateur hour, and I think everything just continues to point to some kind of cover-up, and that's why we've got to get to the bottom of all this.
So there's a really a disturbing detail I found. I mean, maybe it's just a little small one, but I just thought it was weird that the president dispatched his personal bodyguard to deliver the letter to Comey. I thought that was just weird. This is not a normal story that we're seeing in any way, shape, or form. Representative Mark Pocan from the great state of Wisconsin, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we're going to be right back after this quick break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're going to be taking your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader, and this is from page 39, chapter titled An Informed and Educated Electorate. The epigraph, the quote that opens the chapter, is from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Whenever the people are well informed, however, they can be trusted with their own government, that whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them right. Into the chapter. Talk radio news service based in Washington, D.C. is owned and run by my dear friend Ellen Ratner. Ellen is an experienced and accomplished journalist, and a large number of interns and young journalism school graduates get their feet wet in reporting by working for her. In March 2010, I was in Washington for a meeting with a group of senators, and I needed a studio from which to do my radio and TV show. Ellen was gracious enough to offer me hers. I arrived as 3 of her interns were producing a panel discussion type of TV show for web distribution at talkmedianews.com, in which they were discussing for their viewing audience their recent experiences on Capitol Hill. One intern panelist related that a White House correspondent for one of the big 3 TV networks had told her that the network registered a huge amount of interest in the hot story that week of a congressman's sexual indiscretions. Far less popular were stories about the debates on health care, the conflicts in the Middle East, and even the Americans who had died recently in Iraq or Afghanistan. The intern said, so that's the story they have to run with on the news, relating the substance of the network's correspondents' thoughts, because that's what the American people want to see. If the network doesn't give people what they want to see, viewers will tune away and the network won't have any viewers, ratings, or revenues. The other 2 interns commiserated with the first about what a shame it was that Americans wanted the titillating stories instead of the substantive ones, but they accepted without question that the network was therefore obliged to, quote, give people what they want, end quote. When they finished their panel discussion, I asked these college students if they knew that there was a time in the United States when radio and TV stations and news networks broadcast the actual news instead of infotainment because the law required them to. None of them had any idea what I was talking about. But the reality is that from the 1920s, when radio really started going big in the United States, until Reagan rolled it back in 1987, federal communications law required a certain amount of public service programming from radio and television stations as a condition of retaining their broadcast licenses. The agreement was basic and simple. In exchange for the media owners being granted a license from the Federal Communications Commission to use their airwaves, owned by the public, they had to serve the public interest first, and only then could they go about the business of making money. If they didn't do so, when it came time to renew their license, public groups and individuals could show up at public hearings on the license renewal and argue for the licenses being denied. One small way that stations lived up to their public service mandate was by airing public service announcements for local nonprofit groups, community calendars, and other charitable causes. They also had to abide by something called the Fairness Doctrine, which required them to air diverse viewpoints on controversial issues. Separately, during election campaigns, broadcasters had to abide by the equal time rule, which required them to provide equal airtime to rival candidates in any election. But the biggest way that they proved that they were providing a public service and meeting the requirements of the Fairness Doctrine was by broadcasting the news, real news, actual news, local, national, and international news produced by professional old-school journalists. Because the news didn't draw huge ratings like entertainment shows, although tens of millions of Americans did watch it every night on TV and listen to it at the top of every hour on radio from coast to coast. And because real news was expensive to produce, with bureaus and correspondents all over the world, news was a money loser for all of the big 3 TV networks and for most local and radio and national radio and TV stations. But it was such a sacred thing. This was, after all, the keystone that held together the station's license to broadcast and thus to do business. It didn't matter if it lost money. It made all the other money-making things possible. Through much of the early 1970s, I worked in the newsroom of a radio station in Lansing, Michigan. It had been started and was then run by 3 local guys, an engineer, a salesman, and a radio broadcaster. They split up the responsibilities like you expect, and all were around the building most days and would hang out from time to time with the on-air crew, all except the sales guy. I was forbidden from talking with him because I worked in news. There could be no hint, ever, anywhere, that our radio station had violated the FCC's programming in the public interest mandate by, for example, my going easy on an advertiser in a news story or promoting another advertiser in a different story. News had to be news, separate from profits and revenue. And if it wasn't, I'd be fired on the spot. News, in other words, wasn't part of the free market. It was part of our nation's intellectual commons, and thus the price of the station's license. After Reagan blew up the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, 2 very interesting things happened. The first was the rise of right-wing hate speech talk radio, starting with Rush Limbaugh that very year. The second, which really stepped up after President Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of '96, was that the money-losing news divisions of the big three television networks were taken under the wings of their entertainment divisions and wrung dry. Foreign bureaus were closed, reporters were fired, stories that promoted the wonders of advertisers owned by the same mega corporations began to appear, and investigative journalism began to die. It's the Thom Hartmann Reader.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin filling in, and I am joined on phone by Caitlin Saposi Belknap from Move to Amend, talking about getting money out of politics, how to end corporate personhood. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
So tell me a little bit. I know we've got an anniversary coming up. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on.
Well, the anniversary is actually today. May 10th marks the 131st, we're calling it birthday of corporate personhood. 131 years ago today was the notorious Supreme Court decision, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, which Tom writes about extensively in his book, Unequal Protection, and kind of lays out that whole story of that weird case where the court might not have actually at all said that corporations are persons, but it's the one that went down in history with that. And so it was really the first place that corporations were able to get their way into the Constitution. And we've had 131 years of corporate personhood ever since, which has been wreaking havoc on our democracy, making democracy basically impossible, because any law that we try to pass to protect ourselves from corporations that might be overstepping their bounds is in jeopardy of being overturned by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional because it violates corporate rights. And so Move to Amend is working to amend the Constitution to make clear that only human beings have constitutional rights, and also that money is not speech, so that we can get big money out of politics.
So, Caitlin, it really was, I mean, like when you look at the facts on the case, it wasn't meant to ascribe personhood to corporations. I mean, it was like, it's a footnote. It's a weird misreading purposefully of a footnote in a case that has, I mean, like if corporations are people, they're undying people, right? They
live forever. Yes.
They live forever, which right there, as a class, they have a distinct advantage against us mere mortals. So I mean, it's just such a nonsense concept that I really don't understand how it has 131 years. How has it lasted this long when it is on its face ridiculous?
Well, I think it goes to show the corruption of the American political and legal system going all the way back. I mean, you know, we've never been a democracy. This is a country founded on slavery and genocide. And it's true that the way that corporate lawyers were able to kind of slip it in was a head note that is not even legal precedent. And so it was, you know, basically kind of a conspiracy theory, or there's a conspiracy theory that maybe it really was a conspiracy to try and flip the switch and let corporations into the Constitution. But that was the robber baron era. That was the height of political corruption, and except for maybe only second to, you know, today. And so what we see is the wealthy, through the corporate form, using the legal system to try and create a barrier so that the public cannot hold them accountable. And that's what corporate personhood does. And corporations don't need personhood to operate. But it was an effort following the Civil War, when you had a flood of new people able to claim constitutional rights after ending slavery, and women agitating for the right to vote as well and to be recognized as persons. It was a coup by the wealthy to hold on to the Constitution and be able to use it against us. And so it's high time that we amend the Constitution and make clear I mean, we've had numerous cases since that one, so it's not like we can just go back and say, hey, this was a mistake, let's undo it all. I mean, the Supreme Court has explicitly ruled numerous times since then that, yes, it does believe that corporations have constitutional rights. So we need to overrule the court and amend the Constitution.
So Move to Amend has a very clear goal. How can people get involved, and what do you think the next steps on this action are?
People can get involved by going to movetoamend.org/join and signing our petition as the very first step. That'll put us in touch with you and you in touch with us, and we will let you know how you can get involved locally. We're a grassroots campaign, so we have local chapters all over the country. We are working on an amendment that is in Congress right now. House Joint Resolution 48 is in the House of Representatives. Our goal is to get it introduced in the Senate this year as well. And a lot of the work we do, though, is education and building a mass movement, because the only way to amend the Constitution is to build a people's movement. It's not going to come from Congress. It's not going to come from the president, no matter who that is. It's going to have to come from the people, organized, militant, and engaged. And so we are 430-something thousand people strong, and we need more people to join our effort. We're really excited to be partnering with Free Speech TV today to draw attention to this corporate personhood history. And folks can tune into Free Speech TV tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern to watch Legalized Democracy, which is a 30-minute introduction to this movement, and find out how you can get involved and also learn more about this history and why we absolutely have to amend the Constitution. And then I'll be doing a Facebook Live conversation right after the film at 9:30 Eastern on Free Speech TV's Facebook. So if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer them there. But really what we need is people to get involved. Call your Congress member, but also, you know, let the public, the rest of the American public, know about this issue. Almost everybody believes that corporations should not have constitutional rights. 80% of the public believe that. But what people don't know is that there's a movement to do something about it. And so that's where we have to engage folks.
Caitlin Saposi-Belknap with Move to Amend at movetoamend.org. Thanks for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program. And this is only with a movement are we going to be able to take on money power. But people power will beat money power as long as we're organized. So thank you for organizing the people to take on money in politics, corporate personhood, the farce that is corporate personhood. And we're going to keep this conversation going in just a moment. And so Caitlin gave you a few different places where you can learn more, but you can start at movetoamend.org. And we're going to be right back with more of the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You can go to movetoamend.org to learn more about the movement to get money out of politics. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin filling in. We're going to go right to the lines here. And we're going to go to Loretta in Wisconsin. You're on the line.
Hi there.
Hi.
Loretta here. Oh, yeah. I just want to back up that woman. Absolutely. Watch that program. Get busy. And I'm from Wisconsin, and I have written Mark Polkan, and it's really good stuff of what he's doing as a Democrat. My concern is, of course, the Democrats themselves support this people movement. Get your organization together to be what you're supposed to be, the Democrats. So it's just disheartening, you know, to see things fall all apart in the government, but people power. I'm part of it, and I just applaud Mark Polkan, and I hope that more Democrats can band together and help the country out as us people are trying to help the country out.
Loretta, thanks so much for your call, and I think that is a very clear call to action for the Democrats on the Hill. And what I'll say is that, the thing that we control is ourselves. And this era, we've seen that when the people are united, we really can't be stopped, and we are leading the resistance. The resistance is coming from the grassroots. The resistance is coming from the people who are taking to the streets in record numbers, the people who are calling Congress, their senators and their representative, and just hammering these offices. They're calling 202-225-3121. They're making their voices heard. They're signing petitions. They're delivering the petitions. They're going to the town halls. When the cowards and the Republican cowards are too cowardly to face their constituents, they're being creative. They're setting up town halls with an empty chair. They're inviting Democrats from neighboring jurisdictions over, from neighboring districts over to their town hall to explain for the Republicans who are too cowardly to face their bosses, the people. And, I think that it's high time that candidates who want to, if there is a Republican who is too scared to face their bosses and answer for what they've done, like pull the lever for Trump care, pull the lever to raid Medicare, to destroy Medicaid, to throw 24 million people off of health care, all to advance a massive tax cut for the wealthy. If there is a Republican who's too scared to have a town hall on that, then I think that somebody should step up to run against that Republican, and they should have the town hall, and the people should turn out to their town hall, make news about the fact that this coward Republican won't face their bosses, the people, and that somebody is stepping up to try to replace that coward. That is people power. That is the movement that we're building, and we just have to keep leading. The people have to keep leading, and D.C. will be forced to follow. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We're going to go right to the phones. Thomas in New York, you're on the line.
Hi, how you doing, Alex?
Good.
I was going to ask something for Pocan, but he left. But I wanted to ask you personally. The two number one federally funded programs is Medicaid and Social Security. And the fact of the matter is that the Republican Party for decades have been trying to get rid of both of these federally funded programs. They are now succeeding in getting rid of Medicaid by handing it off as grants to the state. But I wanted to ask you, how long do you think when they're going to turn around and go after Social Security?
They already are, Thomas. So they already are. They never stop. It's an endless battle. And, the one thing is they haven't won. The bill that passed the House, that's barely the end of the first quarter. It's still got to go through the Senate. Then it's got to go to conference. And then the conference has to go back to both houses. And then they both have to pass it. It's an arduous process. And you are right. In Trump care, which the reason that Social Security is not in Trump care is not because they don't want to destroy it and hand it over to their friends, their greedy liar friends on Wall Street. It's because they know to pass these deeply unpopular things, they have to use a trick of the Senate called reconciliation, which will require them to have only a simple majority. And Social Security cannot be touched in budget reconciliation because Social Security is not part of the federal budget. This is all like very kind of esoteric, in the weeds, how DC operates. But that's why only Medicare and Medicaid are being hacked into with Trump Care. And let me spell it out: $118 billion raided out of Medicare. And what their goal is there. So what they've done is they're going to hammer Medicare. They're raiding the trust fund, and then they're going to come back later and they're going to say, with crocodile tears in their eyes, after they stole the money out of Medicare, they're going to say, oh, you know, there's just not enough money in there, and so we're going to have to turn it over to our criminal friends in the insurance industry. Oh, woe is me. So, I mean, that's why they're doing it. They're setting up Medicare for full destruction. Right now, they're just raiding it for, they're raiding it for $118 billion to set up that two-step destruction of Medicare. And they're going after Medicaid in one, right? They're going after completely destroying Medicaid in one go by raiding it of $880 billion. But just in case you think I'm overblowing it, an article just came out in Roll Call yesterday about Donald Trump's upcoming budget. So, again, I don't want to get lost in all of the CRs and budget, but we just funded the government, and now there's got to be a budget for fiscal year 2018, and that's going to start really right now. It's on top of reconciliation. So on top of destroying Medicaid by cutting $880 billion out of it, the FY18 budget cuts another $800 billion out of what they're calling means-tested mandatory programs. But they're also liars, because in the same discussion, they have Social Security. So I'm getting right to where your question is. They're always after Social Security, and they just stated yesterday that in their FY 2018 budget, they're going to come after Medicaid for hundreds of billions of dollars more, food stamps, SNAP program, and also Social Security, coming at it through the disability side of the program. So what they like to do is pretend that there's two Social Securities. There's not. There's just one unified system. But Thomas, they're not. The answer is they started. It was literally the first thing they did. Sam Johnson put in a bill to destroy Social Security last year. So, Thomas, thank you so much for your call. And it's why we have to just continue fighting. It's a dynamic, ongoing fight. Right now, they do have the power, and we do have to stop them from getting their way, from destroying Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. At the same time, on the Democratic side and in the people power movement, we have to always fight for what we want. So expanding Medicare to cover everybody. And now there's more than half the Democratic caucus in the House are on H.R. 676, John Conyers' single-payer Medicare for All program, or single-payer bill. And more than 80% of the Democratic caucus is on a bill to expand Social Security from John Larson from Connecticut. So, I mean, we are making progress. We have to keep firming up the progress on the left and the elected Democrats. We have to just excise the neoliberal third way Wall Street Democrats from the discussion and really firm up that the center of the Democratic Party is expanding Medicare to cover everybody, expanding Social Security and paying for it by making millionaires and billionaires pay the same rate as the rest of us. And if we expand Medicare, what we're really doing is we're just owning the fact that Medicaid is providing millions and millions and millions of people health care, and Medicare is providing millions of people health care. And what we really need to do is just have one system that includes all of that. And the thing it doesn't include is for-profit insurance. We just throw that by the wayside as an idea that was tried and failed and continues to fail. and is completely unnecessary to provide health care. So, Thomas, we've got our work cut out for us, but I am happy to take it on. I'm going to go to Laura in Illinois. Laura, you're on the line.
Yeah, hi. I'm an independent, so I am, against the corporate, Republicans and also the, corporate neoliberal wing of the Democrats as well. So, but I really think that pushing for this investigation and bringing down Trump would really kind of take the wind out of their sails, the Republicans, for all of this, massive, I call it the massive austerity program, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to talk to Representative Pocan because I just was on the line with Representative Schakowsky's office, and they told me that a special prosecutor would be appointed by the Attorney General to investigate Trump. But an independent commission would be appointed by Congress. We really need to call for the right thing, and I think it's an independent commission rather than leaving this in Jeff Sessions' office, even though he's recused himself. That doesn't matter. He still can influence who would be a special prosecutor. So I think we should call for an independent commission. And there's a March for Truth, Saturday, June 3rd, around this issue, to investigate fully, Trump and his ties to the Russian oligarchs is what I call them. And his financial ties and all of the Russian connection. So I would hope that everybody would go to the March for Truth and sign up. It's June 3rd, and it's going to be in lots of cities. So not one really big one, but, many, many cities. And get out there and call your senators and rep about this. It's really important that we push back and we don't let this firing of Comey just kind of drift away, right?
Laura, I think you're exactly right. I think that there's one thing that's really clear to me, that there is a sense that the administration is the Titanic and it's sinking. It's hit the iceberg, or there's at least, right, like that. This is what's going on. And Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are on the deck, and they are trying to, as quickly as possible, rip out as much of the movables as possible. And in this case, what I'm saying is they know it. This is coming to an end, and I do feel this in this town. But they're trying to ram through the destruction of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid as much as they can get before they jump ship, right? And that's what I'm seeing is going on here. So I think you're right that we do need to be precise in what we're calling for. And I do think there are a variety of things: a select committee, a special prosecutor, an independent prosecutor. There are pluses and minuses. I mean, a select committee or an independent committee would have Republicans and Democrats on it as well. The special prosecutor has a lot more authority. If you have a Ken Starr, for example, type situation going on, that is above. So once they're impaneled and empowered, then they're above political interference. And, to be honest, I'm not an expert on this, Laura, and I think what we should be calling for is anything that will get us an independent investigation into the Trump administration that is free from political interference, because we're seeing just time after time that when the investigation gets close to them, they use their power to interfere and obstruct it. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is from page 98, the subchapter, The Supreme Court Takes Over. As Charles and Mary Beard, they were famous historians in the 1930s, wrote in The Rise of American Civilization, which is their famous historical record of the United States, quote, "But the states had to reckon with the Federalist interpretation of the Constitution by John Marshall, who, as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1801 to 1835, never failed to exalt the pro-business doctrines of Hamilton above the claims of the states. Marshall, appointed to the court by Federalist John Adams, who had appointed for life only Federalists to all federal judgeships, was what today would be called a judicial activist. As the Beards wrote, quote, by historic irony, he, Marshall, administered the oath of office to his bitterest enemy, Thomas Jefferson. And for a quarter of a century after the author of the Declaration of Independence retired to private life, the stern Chief Justice continued to announce old Federalist rulings from the Supreme Bench. In 1803, during the second year of Jefferson's presidency, Marshall took on a power for himself and future Supreme Courts that made President Jefferson apoplectic. In the Marbury v. Madison case, as the Beards related, quote, Marshall had been in his high post only 2 years when he laid down for the first time, in the name of the entire court, the doctrine that the judges have the power to declare an act of Congress null and void, when in their opinion it violates the Constitution. This power was not expressly conferred on the court by the Constitution. Although many able men have held that the judicial branch of government enjoyed it, the principle was not positively established until 1803 by Marshall's ruling in this case. End of quote. Jefferson, shocked, bluntly expressed his concern to his old friend Judge Spencer Roane, the son-in-law of Patrick Henry and a justice on the Virginia Supreme Court. If this opinion be sound, Jefferson wrote, then indeed is our Constitution a complete felo de se, legally a suicide. For intending to establish 3 departments, coordinate and independent, that they might each check and balance one another. This decision has given, according to this opinion, to one of them alone the right to prescribe rules for the government of the others, and to that one, too, which is unelected by and independent of the nation. Jefferson continued in full fury. The Constitution, on this hypothesis, is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape into any form they please. It should be remembered as an axiom of eternal truth in politics that whatever power in any government is independent is absolute also. In theory only at first, while the spirit of the people is up, but in practice, as fast as that relaxes. Independence can be trusted nowhere but with the people in mass. They are inherently independent of all but moral law. My construction of the Constitution is very different from that you quote. It is that each department is truly independent of the others and has an equal right to decide for itself what is the meaning of the Constitution in the cases submitted to its action, and especially where it is to act ultimately and without appeal. A judiciary independent of a king or executive alone is a good thing, but independent of the will of the nation is a solecism, a blunder, at least in a Republican government. In his decision putting the Supreme Court above the elected officials, the legislature and the president, John Marshall was echoing Hamilton's Federalist mistrust of any form of government constrained solely by those elected by the people. Kings had faced challenges, the Federalists argued, and fought back because as kings they could force decisions without having to wait for a consensus of the people. This powerful federal judiciary, only partially answerable to the people, the Federalists believed, was essential to the survival of the nation. As Hamilton wrote in the Federalist Papers in number 23 about whether there should be constraints in the Constitution that would prevent the U.S. government from operating outside the will of its people, quote, "These constitutional powers ought to exist without limitation because it is impossible to foresee or define the extent and variety of national exigencies or the correspondent extent and variety of the means by which may be necessary to satisfy them. The circumstances that endanger the safety of nations are infinite, and for this reason no constitutional shackles can wisely be imposed on the power to which the care of it is committed." Hamilton's argument is essentially what was said by the Bush administration lawyers who argued in their legal briefs for massive increases in presidential powers post 9/11. Madison, as an ally of Jefferson, rebutted Hamilton's worldview, perhaps most eloquently, in the Federalist Papers number 39, when he wrote, "It is essential to such a government that it be derived from the great body of society, not from an inconsiderable proportion or a favored class of it. Otherwise, a handful of tyrannical nobles exercising their oppressions by a delegation of their powers might aspire to the rank of republicans and claim for their government the honorable title of republic." Jefferson further elaborated his arguments for 3 independent and equal in power branches of government, as well in numerous writings during the 1780s as the Constitution was being formed. But that was then, and this was 1803. The deed was done by Marshall, and the Federalists had won. That said, there is no doubt that Marshall, like Hamilton, believed he was doing the best thing for the nation that he had served as a soldier during the Revolutionary War. In the 1819 McCulloch versus Maryland decision, for example, he referenced government deriving all its power from and by the people. Anyway, the book is Unequal Protection.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, and we will be taking your calls, I promise. But right now, we have a really important story that I know everybody, all of you all want to hear about this. And there's just so much going on that there are things that are can be lost in the shuffle. Like yesterday, there was a reporter in West Virginia who was arrested for supposedly asking his question too loudly to HHS Secretary Tom Price. And then there is the case of the Code Pink activists who were arrested and faced jail time for engaging in their constitutionally protected right of free speech and assembly, and, laughing at Jeff Sessions, at head Klansman-in-chief Jeff Sessions, is now apparently making fun of, might be, so I might be next. Satire might be the next protected form of speech that comes under threat. But, the Code Pink, Desiree was arrested with Tig Berry, who's joining us by phone right now. And Tig, can you just kind of walk us through that day when you were arrested for engaging in your constitutionally protected right to protest Jeff Sessions?
Sure. Thank you for having me. We just held a press conference slash laugh-in at the Department of Justice because it's such a laughing matter. We were in his confirmation hearing. There were more than 20 groups. There were 25 arrests total that day. We were in there. Many of us, the Code Pink women, were dressed as Lady Liberty. They had signs saying, "Don't confirm Jeff Sessions. He's a racist. He's Islamophobic." All the different things that people have to say. We were, again, using our First Amendment protected right of freedom of speech. And before the gavel went down, the place went into pandemonium because His Royal Highness Jeff Sessions walked into the room. So we took that opportunity to get a little louder. As the room was getting louder, we stood on our chairs, me and my friend Lenny Bianchi. We put on faux Ku Klux Klan outfits with the little hat, and we pretended we were Ku Klux Klan. They were there to welcome Jeffrey Sessions. So we were waving and yelling and saying, "Hey, Jeff, come on over here. Your good buddies are here." And for this, we were taken down and summarily hauled out of the room. We used our, again, First Amendment rights of freedom of speech to say what we felt about his policies. And we were arrested, booked, and held for 12 hours. And then about 45 minutes later, after the gavel had went down, Desiree Feruz chuckled a little bit when she heard something that was very funny, such as Jeff Sessions is out there to protect everyone's rights, civil rights. And she was arrested as well. And then we went to trial, and we were really sure that the jury would find us not guilty. But as the judge had made it a little difficult for them because he said that they would only be allowed to deliberate on Monday, so they had to wait about 6 days. They found us guilty, and we're awaiting sentencing on June 21st.
So what? It's just, I really think that there's this faux thing happening from the far right wing where they're pretending that they're standing up for free speech when really what they like to do is like get violent at protests and crack some skulls. And I'm just, when there are literal attacks on free speech happening, which is when the coercive power of the government is used to prosecute people for their speech, and the effect of prosecuting you and Desiree is also a chilling effect for everyone else out there. Now a journalist has been arrested for asking their question too loudly. So
Well, let me give you another example.
Please.
So we're in these buildings all the time, right? Well, a friend of mine went to a meeting. It was called Victory for Israel. It wasn't a briefing. It wasn't a committee hearing or anything. It was just a meeting inside a room. You had to RSVP. She RSVP'd. She's a well-known Jewish anti-Zionist activist. She filled out the form, RSVP'd, signed herself in, got the name tag at the door, walked in the door, and one of the representatives recognized her, threw her out of the room, and had her arrested. And she today went into court. She's got 3 charges on her now for that. And this is what we're facing. We had 3 charges thrown on us. Our first charge was incommoding, which is just meaning blocking people's way, and it ended up being 3 charges. And they knew they could get us on 1 or 2 of the other charges to give us a possibility of a year in jail.
And I'll give you another one of I was working on a protest on basically Paul Ryan's budget being a death sentence for people who are living with HIV and AIDS. And so there was a group of activists who went to Paul Ryan's office to raise their voices. And it's important. This is the people's building that you were arrested in, right? I mean, we, the people, own that building. It is ours. It is no one else's. It is not private property. It is ours. It is literally the people's building. So we were outside of Paul Ryan's office, and there were some activists who engaged in acts of civil disobedience, and they were arrested. But here's the thing that I'd never seen before. The Capitol Police removed a reporter from the scene, removed the reporter around the corner by threatening arrest for being in the hallways of the people's building, doing his job as a reporter, and actually detained that reporter to remove him. That.
Well, can I
go ahead?
I'm just going to tell you one thing. one thing is that really bothered me about we had a 2-day trial. And during the entire 2-day trial, it took 2 prosecution defense attorneys, and they kept bringing up the rules of the House, rules of the Senate. I defied them the whole time. Produce the rules. There are no rules. Police do not understand the Bill of Rights. They don't follow the fact that you can't just artificially detain someone for doing absolutely nothing. And this is what they do.
And, it's this creeping, if we don't fight it at each turn, then it becomes normalized. Then it becomes a thing.
Mm-hmm. I've seen people get arrested for putting up peace sign, just holding up their hand, a mere peace sign in a Armed Services Committee hearing.
Teague, where can people get involved? How can we raise this issue of free speech and really make a lot of noise, make sure that everybody knows about it, support you and your compatriot, Desiree, and anyone. I feel like the left broadly needs to understand that free speech is our issue. If we can't use our speech, if we can't use the satire, what you engaged in was clear satire, constitutionally protected, because we recognize the importance of allowing speech, the importance of holding the powerful accountable using speech, using satire, this is the bulwark against tyranny, is our free speech. How can people get involved in raising awareness on this, in supporting you? And, what are ways that we can make sure that the left broadly understands that this fight over free speech is a primary fight for all of us?
Well, I'll give you a couple different things. One, you can go to codepink.org, and we have a list of various organizations that are involved in this and around the country. And locally, there's Disrupt J20, which there are now 330 people that are still facing federal crimes for protesting the inauguration. You can go and support us on June 21st. We'll be at 600 Indiana Avenue Northwest, where we'll be in the Moultrie building, and we'll be standing before a judge who will give us a sentence of possibly 1 year. Come out and be with us, and let's all fight, be part of the resistance.
Teague Berry from Code Pink, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for raising your voices, for raising your voice, for speaking truth to power. We, the people, cannot allow our voices to be taken from us. That's what they're trying to do. They're scared of us raising our voices, and that's why they're trying to take our voice away. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. We're going to be taking your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We're taking your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, and we're going to go right to the phones. Let's go to Brian in Nebraska. Brian, you're on the line.
Hi, Alex. I was listening to your show before, and the lady was on there with Move to Amend, and I thought, Move to Amend is a great idea, and single payer and renewable energy, all of the progressive issues. I don't think they're ever going to go anywhere until we do something about getting the voting system repaired. I mean, the voter ID laws, the interstate cross-check, the gerrymandering, primary rigging, the electoral college. I don't think we're ever going to get any candidates that are going to vote for those and support those progressive issues until we can get a fair voting system, and I have not heard anyone. I mean, nobody's talking about this. Maybe it's because, it's just broken in so many ways that, you can't come up with a unified idea on how to battle it. But, I'd really like to hear what people's ideas are about how we can make some progress with the electoral system.
Brian, thanks so much for your call. I think first there are some great organizations working on this. They're somewhat across the spectrum. What I mean is that President Obama has actually is working on a large-scale project against gerrymandering, and so you have more establishment organizations working on different parts of it, and you also have a lot of progressive organizations who do fight against individual things like voter ID laws and things like that. And there are some movements to reform the Electoral College. I just personally, I'd like to see a push towards representational or proportional allotment of Electoral College, of the Electoral College, so that it wasn't a winner-take-all situation. That would right there, you have a tremendous benefit for progressives, for populists. But I think one of the things is you're kind of getting at is, and this is me personally, and I wish we did have this movement wide, which is, what is our philosophy on, what is our principles on electoral process? Like, what, when you dig into it, instead of just a constellation of different things, we need a principle. And I think that we should unite around the principle that anything that is in the direction of majoritarian, anything that actually increases an individual's voice and vote and power, is the progressive direction to move in, which means getting rid of caucuses, for example. Those are anti-majoritarian. Weekend voting, that is pro-majoritarian. It would allow more people to vote. But that principle is what I think we really should try to unite all of the progressive movement around. So, Brian, thank you for your call. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back. Welcome back on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, taking your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program, so give us a call. I'm going to go to Johnny in Texas. Johnny, you're on the line.
Hey, Alex. With all due respect to caller Barry, I think it was 2 callers back, we have to multitask. The Republicans want us to force all our time, energy, and resources on just one issue. So to say just to focus our concerns with getting money out of politics alone, that's a recipe for failure. You have to do that and more, all at the same time. And there's lots of people to be volunteers to do that. Not so much money, but lots of volunteer time. A few deep pockets who are smart enough to focus their money all around the clock, that would be fantastic. That's what we need to do. But that's not why I'm calling.
Johnny, I agree with that point, though, and I'll let you get to your main point, but just want to agree that we have to be able to multitask. And at the same time, I don't know if you're listening yesterday, I was talking with John Bowser-Baumann about the fact that the resistance is not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a marathon. It's a relay race. And sometimes you're carrying the baton and sometimes you're not. But we as a movement, if we're going to transform this into a movement, we do need to recognize that we're not going to get there by arguing over whose issue is the most important. Because I'll tell you the truth, everyone thinks that their issue is the most important. We have to understand through the act of solidarity that we can create a movement that actually focuses on our principles and all of the various issues working together to take on the entrenched money power. So, Johnny, I agree with you. We can't, we can't just argue amongst ourselves over whose issue is most important.
I don't think we're arguing amongst ourselves, Alex. There's a good chance that caller could have been a plant. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. About an hour ago, a young white male from California called in, and he's an example of one of those Republican voter-type people who voted for Trump and are looking to be offended by the very nature of his question towards you or your guest. He asked you or your guest, what specific crime, I think that's how he phrased it, using the word crime, what crime did Donald Trump or his administration commit to warrant a criminal investigation? And the fact is, it's not necessarily going to rise to a criminal offense where Trump or one of his people can be in prison. But it does rise to the effect of violating his oath of office. He has violated his oath of office in 3 different ways. He's wasted taxpayer money beyond Camp David in the White House, forcing us to pay for other secure sites. He's obstructed justice. That's big time right there. He's destabilizing the balance of power in Asia. He's inciting violence, not just among voters, but among citizens in general. And he's lied about material facts involving health care, his relationship with other countries, heads of state, and his ideology, most important of all. That's a big lie, and that is a violation of his campaign. He promised about protecting health care and senior citizens' rights, and he's gone 180 degrees in the opposite. And if you can't see that, and you call into this show with that question, that's proof enough you are easily offended and you're a low-information voter. And I've got nothing else to say to you except, Alex, let's concentrate our efforts on everybody else.
Johnny, thanks so much for your call. I would add that the caller also didn't understand what a special prosecutor actually does or what the select committee would do. They're investigating. They are actually determining if there is a crime that rises to the level of criminal prosecution. That is exactly what we want to happen. We want an independent investigation into the question of whether a crime or crimes were committed. The reason that we need a special prosecutor, Johnny, as you know, is that if the investigation is being stymied by political interference, which, let's just really straightforwardly, Comey was in charge of the FBI, which has active investigations into possible criminality in the Trump campaign in Trumpland. Let's just call it Trumpland. And Trump, who could be involved in some way because it's in Trumpland. It's his associates. That Trump fired the person who was in charge of the law enforcement agency who was making the investigation. That is what political interference looks like. And we've seen that around the world when you have a more tyrannical executive who actually will get rid of people who are investigating possible and potential abuses of power. That's why we need a special prosecutor. We need an independent investigation into this. You're listening
to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from We the People. This is an illustrated book. It's, illustrated kind of like a comic book. It's very, very readable, but it's serious stuff. This is from page 10. War is the Enemy is the chapter. George Orwell's idea in his novel 1984 that perpetual war was a masterful technique for repressing the masses was not new. On April 20th, 1795, James Madison, who helped shepherd through the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and would become President of the United States in the following decade, wrote, Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies, and from these proceed debts and taxes. And armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. Reflecting on war's impact on the presidency, Madison continued his letter about the dangerous and intoxicating powers of war. In war, too, the discretionary power of the presidency is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, favors, and emoluments, profits, is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. The same malignant aspect in republicanism may be traced in the inequality of fortunes and the opportunities of fraud growing out of a state of war, and in the degeneracy of manners and morals engendered by both. No nation, Madison concluded, could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. Once the Revolutionary War was over and the Constitution had been worked out and presented to the states for ratification, Thomas Jefferson turned his attention to what he and Madison felt was a terrible inadequacy in the new Constitution. It didn't explicitly stipulate the natural rights of the new nation's citizens, and it didn't protect against the rise of new commercial monopolies like the East India Company, which had once dominated life in the colonies and used the British Army as its own private army. On December 20th, 1787, Jefferson wrote to James Madison about his concerns regarding the Constitution. He said bluntly that it was deficient in several areas. Quote, "I will now tell you what I do not like. First, the omission of a Bill of Rights, providing clearly and without the aid of sophism for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, protection against standing armies, restriction of commercial monopolies, the eternal and unremitting force of the habeas corpus laws, and trials by jury in all manners of fact triable by the laws of the land and not by the laws of nations." When the United States was first declared independent in 1776, its founders knew humans had previously faced tyranny in the form of despotic kings and inquisitional churches. The Bill of Rights firmly declared that no church could ever again control a democratic government. And the Declaration of Independence made it clear right from the beginning that when citizens are burdened by, quote, a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. Thus, the founders and the framers disposed of despotism by church or state, guaranteeing the absolute and inviolable rights of a nation's citizens to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there was a third entity that Thomas Jefferson and others worried may also one day rise to seize control of the government and enslave the people. James Madison wrote, "There is an evil which ought to be guarded against in the indefinite accumulation of property from the capacity of holding it in perpetuity by corporations. The power of all corporations ought to be limited in this respect. Their growing wealth acquired by them never fails to be a source of abuses." In 1787, Jefferson proposed an additional amendment to the Bill of Rights to restrain corporations, calling for a constitutional amendment to, quote, ban monopolies in commerce, although it failed under the Federalist opposition of the Hamilton-Adams faction. In arguing for a ban on commercial monopolies, the founders, who had just fought a war of independence against both Britain and the world's largest transnational corporation, the East India Company, whose tea they'd thrown into Boston Harbor, knew the danger of corporations becoming so powerful they could influence government the way the East India Company had persuaded England for a tax reduction and free trade agreement that came to be known as the Tea Act of 1773. But it's not just Madison and Jefferson's remarkable foresight that's warning us about war. More recent presidents have also noted the danger of a corporate usurpation of democracy, particularly when fed by the bloody meat of war. As he was leaving office in 1961, President Dwight Eisenhower looked back over his years as president, as general, as supreme commander of the Allied forces in France during World War II, and noted that the Cold War had brought a new Orwellian type of war to the American landscape, a perpetual war supported by a perpetual war industry. It was the confluence of the two things that Jefferson had warned against and had tried to ban in his first proposed version of the Bill of Rights. In a nationally televised speech, Eisenhower spoke in sobering terms about this. He said, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the structure of our very society. He was talking about the military-industrial complex. It continues from there. The book is We the People.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at hartmanreport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom, who is currently working on a documentary on the devastating effects of climate change. And I am also going to just take your calls for the rest of the hour, starting with Donald in Illinois. Donald, you're on the line.
Yes, hi, Alex. You know what I'm afraid of? That they're going to get away with this, the Republicans. They got away with sticking us in two wars that we shouldn't have been in.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that the Republican Party, the Republican voters themselves, buried their heads in the sand on that one. And they won't even talk about the fact that they started these wars illegally. And my family's all Republican, so I get it every single day. They'll get away with that. They got away with shutting down the government when it came to them not wanting to contribute to President Obama's plan for health care. They actually shut down the government because they didn't want to finance it. And we ended up paying $24 billion. They got away with that one. Well, they're going to get away with this one, and including Benghazi. Nobody wants to mention that the Republican Congress did not want to finance any kind of money in order to fully protect those areas like Benghazi, and Hillary Clinton took the blame with that one.
They just did more. After all of this, they actually signed on to less money for security around the world. Sorry, Donald, keep going.
So anyways, the thing is this. The Democratic Party, they should have been on that right from the start. Never mind the fact that they got together with Mitch McConnell got together with 14 other of his Republicans, and they decided to make a pledge to go ahead and destroy President Obama's administration, because that's all these people care about. They care about their people. The Republican voter themselves, they stick these people in office, and while they're pledging their allegiance to the flag, these people, the ones that they put in the power on the right, are pledging their allegiance to the likes of Grover Norquist, Karl Rove, the Koch brothers, and all the millionaires, billionaires, and corporations that they only consider people and only care to serve. And that's all I got to say.
Donald, thank you for your call. I'm not going to try to rose-colored glasses anything. They could get away with it. It's very possible. I mean, Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America, right? That's true. The Republicans hold the majorities in both houses of Congress. They have unified control of the government. And Donald Trump just fired the head of the FBI because he was investigating his Trumpland's connections to the Russian oligarchs. He did that. We don't know whether or not they're going to get away with it, and they certainly could. I do have a lot of hope. I'll tell you where some of my hope comes from. The election of Donald Trump was a really devastating, demoralizing event. And I think everyone understood that and understands that. And then his when he actually took the oath of office, his inauguration. And, I got a little bit of schadenfreude out of the fact that his crowd was smaller than, the movie night on the mall that happens during the summer. That was funny, but it still didn't give me real hope. But the next day, when the Women's March in D.C. happened, and I saw these crowds that I've never seen before, and, my colleague and friend, John Bowser-Baumann, and others have said, well, there have been crowds in D.C. that large, in the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War era. There were large crowds. I've never seen crowds that large in Washington, D.C. And my hope started there. But it was when I started seeing these photos of similarly or larger crowds all over the country, in LA, in New York, in Chicago, in Seattle, in Miami, huge crowds. And I was like, wow. And I got a little bit more hope. But actually, it was when I then kept seeing more photos from all over the country with smaller crowds, but thousands of people in Duluth, in all these small or smaller cities around the country, in red states, in corners of the country that no one would accuse of being a liberal bastion. And yet there were thousands of people who took to the street to say, no, this administration does not speak for me. We will resist this administration. We will oppose this administration, and we will defeat this administration in their attempts to impose their fringe ideological agenda. And that's really when I got a lot of hope that, yes, we will get through this, because, and it's going to be hard. We should steel ourselves for losses, serious losses and reverses, because they have unified power. But every time the Republicans serve us a loss, every time they steal our money or our health, or they open up the public lands to drilling by big oil and dirty oil, and every time they do something like that, we need to highlight it. We need to freeze it. We need to amplify it. We need to make it radioactive. We need to hang it on them. But I do have hope that they're not going to get away with it, because we are watching, because we have outlets like the Thom Hartmann Program, because we have truth tellers who are building an independent ability to tell our stories, and we don't have to rely on the corporate media, who are the propaganda arm of the billionaires who are sitting there sipping their champagne on their yachts, rooting along for Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan to loot our money and our health. So they could get away with it. They could get away with it, Donald. The only way they're not going to get away with it is if we stay vigilant, if we maintain our vigilance. So thank you for your call, Donald. Kelly in California, you're on the air. Kelly, are you on the line?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. My question was with regard to appointing an independent counsel. I understand that from what I've heard pundits say that takes a long time to get it in place, that the delay, just getting it set up is a big deal, and then getting them up to speed would be a big deal. How does that play? Could that play as a win for Donald Trump by kicking the can down the road a while? And also, does that mean that the current investigations in the Senate and the House end, or do they run concurrently?
I believe they run concurrently, but I'll look into that. I don't know the answer to that. The law enforcement investigations are going to continue in some form or fashion, but they could be interfered with or obstructed. And you're right. No matter which avenue we go or we proceed, it is going to take a while. I mean, Watergate took years. But I will say that that's not going to be a win for Trump, because if there is a special prosecutor, an independent counsel, or a select committee, or all of the above, or anything like that, dominating the story just day after day after day, that is the only thing that he's going to be able to focus on. I mean, if you listen to Mitch McConnell today, he was like, Donald Trump can fire anyone he wants. Now let's get on to this vote that they just had that would have, I believe it would have opened up, it was changing an environmental regulation that would have allowed big oil to poison all of us to make more money. It was a methane regulation, and McConnell, tried to get that through, and he didn't get it through. He didn't get it through.
Today?
Today. And what happens in politics often is that if there is something like the Russia story, if Russia Gate, if an independent, even now, even without a special prosecutor or an independent counsel select committee, it's dominating the narrative here. It's sucking all the oxygen out of the room. And the only other thing that was possible was Trump Care was sucking all the oxygen out of the room. But with now, if they have to just focus on this Russia story, it's not going to be a win for Trump. It's going to be a long process, but we actually should be encouraged to gum up the works, right? We don't want them to be able to do anything else. We want to grind the wheels of Congress right now to an absolute halt, because Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are not going to do anything that benefits the people. The only things they're going to pass are to benefit Donald Trump and his billionaire cabinet members and the people who they, winter and summer with. And so we want this investigation and this story to gum up everything. We want the offices to have to spend, because another thing that happens is offices start questioning, why should they put themselves out there for this administration that might go down in a historic, terrible investigation into collusion with a foreign power. Why would they want to put themselves out there for that administration? So all of that gums up the works, and we shouldn't be that worried about it. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm going to go right to Charles. New Mexico. I love New Mexico. Charles, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the green chili you have down there.
Well, I like to talk about Comey. It's sad to see him go. I, for one, was pissed off at him for doing what he did with Hillary. But then he was also an independent individual. He also didn't take crap from Trump either. So, it's a matter. It was a two-edged sword. And the thing about it is what I'm hearing is that they got rid of him because he wanted more resources more resources allocated for him to investigate this Russian deal. And of course, that was not what Trump wants. And that's just the way it went. The other thing is this, is that we are coming into election time. We don't realize it, but the House is coming up for re-election this year, and so is a couple senators. Everybody get involved. Get your people doing, and also the Democrats. They got to build their base. Go for the dog catchers. Go for the whatever you can do. Be elected. Do it.
Up and down the ballot. Charles, you're speaking my language, which makes sense because you're from New Mexico, a great state that has the best chili in the country. Hatched green chili from New Mexico is a national treasure.
When I was growing up, you're not going to believe this. When I was growing up, the best chili in New Mexico was Chimayo chili. Unfortunately, the kids up there sold all their property, and they're no longer producing Chimayo chili. And when I was traveling the country, I used to travel the country a lot, I went into St. Louis, and they said, we had Chimayo chili. And I said, oh, great. I went in there, and I sat down, and they Tex-Mexed it, and I said, what are you guys doing?
Well, man, I had a guest from New Mexico yesterday, and I was missing the green chili and the sopapillas, and the rational thinking like you're displaying, Charles, that the last caller right before I went out to break was worried that the delaying of the process was actually going to be a win for Trump, and the truth is that the delaying the process is a loss for Trump. It's a win for the resistance. The resistance wants to extend as much of this Russia story and gum up the works because very soon, it's almost now, but it's very soon, we will be in the middle of the 2018 election. You think of the 2018 election, you think of November 2018, but that's when the vote is. The election is all before that, and politicians are often, they make incredibly different decisions during the election time, and that is when the people have the most power. That's when our superpowers, our democratic superpowers, really manifest themselves, is during the election time. So we really do want to draw out right now. We don't want to allow them to get any momentum back. And I think this firing of Comey, I am not sad or mad that Comey was fired. I'm mad that Comey was fired in order to obstruct the investigation into Trump. That's the issue that I have with it. Why he was fired, the motive that Trump fired him for. And I think that, a lot of people around the country share that unease that I have. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I have Bob Ney on the line from Talk Media News. Bob, how are you? Oh, on Skype, joining us by Skype.
Right. I'm watching 4 stories today. Comey, and Nancy Pelosi met with the Dalai Lama. Those are the 4 stories.
Those are them.
Want me to start with Comey?
Please do.
And I'm going to give an analysis, having been a former member of Congress. I'm reading between the Mitch McConnell speak lines, okay? Now, if we go back historically, of course, we all know the story. Comey last July, and he did an unprecedented action where he said, yes, Hillary is fine. There's no problem, no criminal problem, et cetera. Then he proceeded to basically disparage Hillary Clinton. So he didn't really follow the precedents of law. So people had an uneasiness about Comey. Then we all know the rest of the story. Now, the firing of Comey itself, when I first heard about the firing, I thought, okay, Comey's fired. When I read the letter that was delivered to the FBI, and have you covered, by chance today, I've been doing stations, I didn't get a chance to listen. Have you covered who delivered the letter?
Yeah, I just really briefly, I mentioned it to Representative Mark Pocan as this very disturbing little piece of the story, but please tell me more about it.
Right. Well, no one really hardly knows this man named Schiller, and he is a 1989 forward private bodyguard of Donald Trump. And as I understand it, he oversees the operation of the White House. I guess he's kind of just appointed above Secret Service, sort of, but he's not a Secret Service agent. And he personally delivered it to the FBI. Now, that's been a tiny piece of stories. I looked at it as significant because this is Trump's guy that is in all the photographs. If you start to look at them, he's always around. President Trump asks him questions, what he thinks, and he delivers that message. So it's a very personal, here I am, I'm the president, my right-hand guy actually gets in the car and goes over and delivers this. I thought that was frankly significant to show the anger level, the personal feelings, et cetera, of the president on this, firing. But when I read the second paragraph of the letter, I was amazed that anybody would actually put in writing a relationship that between them and any idea of problems or were they in trouble over Russia. The president putting that in there was something I couldn't imagine that actually would be in there. So when I read it, I thought, wow, this is going to really open up a real problem. Now you've got John McCain, who frankly doesn't have a lot of credibility because, look, McCain wants, Trump out worse than, frankly, anybody, all right? So he's saying the word special prosecutor. Mitch McConnell comes along, and this is the Senate speak. I'm used to the Congress. Mitch McConnell comes along and says, well, independent counsel, investigation. McConnell will not go towards a prosecutor. So following up on what you said about this blowing up and continuing, The next argument is going to be between Chuck Schumer wanting a special prosecutor and Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, wants something else. That will be a week or two long argument, I'm predicting to you.
So, Bob, what do you, this is a very heavy news week. The House passed Trump Care out of the House, and then they had a beer bash celebration in the Rose Garden, which I thought was really bad optics in political speak for them. The attack ads wrote themselves. And then I also thought it was weird they spiked the football after barely the first quarter is done. There's a lot more to a bill becoming a law than getting it out of the House. And I was talking about how this is going to eat up this entire time, basically getting us into the cycle, right? Like they would have nothing else that they could focus on other than Trump Care. And then, Tuesday happened, and I had to be like, actually, Comey and Russia are going to take up the entirety. How else could anything like move or even a discussion be had in this town with what just happened with Donald Trump firing Comey, sending his bodyguard to do it, and putting this really bizarrely admission-like paragraph in the letter that he sent him. How is it? There's no way that I can conceive where the fight between the Democrats and the Republicans in Congress about what to do now around Russia does not eat up all of their agenda for, I think, all the way until the 2018 elections.
Well, there'll be a lot of oxygen out of the room. Now, that depends, though, on how the Democratic side also handles this. Look, there will be divisions amongst the Republican to Republican. Happens all the time. I served there. I saw it constantly. But again, the president was different. This is now President Trump there, so that adds another dynamic, because how much will he interfere in this? If he interferes at all in the selection, in the process, then that's an additional problem. I think if this were Bush, he would, frankly, because of Karl Rove, would have stayed, hands off. I'm not sure Donald Trump will, take the same approach, or he'll go to Twitter, and that will further, complicate everything. But I think you're right. The secondary issue, is the health care, and the Republicans are trying to figure out what they're going to do on that, although the Senate's going to dramatically change everything. But I still think right now there will be arguments about how to proceed on this, not just to proceed, because Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, said, yes, we're going to proceed. Paul Ryan's been obviously much more quiet. But I think
Bob, has Paul Ryan said anything yet?
I tried before this show to find something, and I can't find where he's announced anything. Mitch McConnell took the lead. But of course, John McCain's breathing down Mitch McConnell's neck. So you've got not only the issue of what the Democratic side's going to do, not only the issue of what the White House is going to do and how they react, you have internally, John McCain breathing down Mitch McConnell's neck. And I'm not sure McCain's going to accept, and I'm no McCain fan, but I'm not sure McCain's going to sit back and accept the fact that Mitch McConnell doesn't want to do a special prosecutor.
Bob Ney, Talk Media News. I wish we had more time. I really would appreciate, and I do appreciate, your analysis and insight into this. So thank you for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thank you.
We're going to be taking more of your calls coming up in the last hour of the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today I'm reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now. It's actually a compilation of mostly, there's some commentary in there, but mostly it's diaries and letters that I sent to friends on travels around the world, and it's kind of a autobiography, I suppose, of sorts. This is from chapter, I don't know what the chapter number is. It's titled Life in a Teepee. It's on page 25. And it starts with a quote from Lenny Bruce. Every day people are straying away from the church and going back to God. My best friend through school was Clark Stinson. We met when we were 13, and instead of pursuing the normal pastimes of teenagers, we spent our time studying Sanskrit. We had an old study guide book I found in my father's library, reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead and arguing minutiae from the Bible. Clark's mother was interested in metaphysics and shared a book called Autobiography of a Yogi with us. Years later, when I went to Detroit with her and Clark to attend an initiation in Kriya Yoga by Yogacharya Oliver Black, the oldest living disciple of Yogananda, I recognized Yogananda's Kriya technique as identical to an ancient Coptic exercise Master Stanley had taught us years earlier called the Cobra Breath. I introduced Clark to Master Stanley, and Lee and Clark and I began a serious study of spirituality. We were both in our late teens by then, and Clark had recently married. I was recovering from a painful breakup with a girlfriend, and we agreed that to do our spiritual work best, we should seek isolation. So Clark and his wife bought a teepee, and I bought one, and we three gave away everything else we owned in the world except some clothes and our spiritual books. We bought 100 pounds of wheat, 100 pounds of dried fruits, some basic camping equipment, and got a ride up into Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where an old trapper led us on a 3-day trek back into the Chippewa National Forest to a small lake that isn't on most maps. We spent the summer there, Clark and his wife on one side of the lake, me on the other. 3 days a week, we practiced silence and did meditation and prayer every day for hours. I had a pet tachinid fly, a small insect that looks like a honeybee, but is actually a fly. When I'd meditate in the morning on my blanket outside my teepee, he'd come and hover just over my right hand as if he were drawing nourishment from me. Sometimes he'd hover there for as much as 20 minutes. Occasionally, he'd land and walk around with careful steps like an astronaut exploring a distant but friendly planet. I also shared my teepee with a large and furry brown and black wolf spider who came out at night as the sun set and picked the sleeping mosquitoes off the canvas on the west side of my teepee. I watched the play of life and death, predator and prey. Here's an odd synchronicity that Carl Jung would have appreciated. I haven't seen a tachinid fly for years, but as I'm typing these words into a laptop computer on my back porch in Atlanta, one just hovered over my left hand for a few moments and then landed. He's here with me as I'm typing, sitting on my hand. One cold and rainy afternoon, Clark and I were walking through the woods looking for berries and edible plants. We'd gotten pretty skilled at identifying what was safe and what wasn't, and we're filling a bag with leaves and fruits. This must be what our ancestors lived like, Clark observed, hunting and gathering. Except we're vegetarians, so we're just gathering, I said, joking. But to Clark, it wasn't a joke. Seriously, what we call civilization started when humans started farming. But humans like us were around for tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years before that, fully conscious, awake, aware, thinking and feeling just like us. But they were hunters and gatherers instead of farmers. I said, without agriculture, there'd be no civilization. It was an interesting thought. Remember Miss Hemmer? Clark said. Miss Hemmer had been our 8th grade biology teacher and one of the best teachers I'd ever known in my life. Clark and I had conspired to make her life difficult, but we also loved her and learned more from her each month than from any of our other teachers in a year. And she was a huge fan of Margaret Mead.
Clark said, she said that in primitive societies, there isn't suicide, depression, drug addiction, all that stuff. The noble savage, I said, shivering. I'm skeptical and cold. And the Indians who lived here once were probably cold too. He shrugged and said, this life seems much more natural to me. At least I had to agree with that. A few days later, Clark came running over to my teepee with his Bible, all excited. Look at this, he said, pointing to Genesis 4:2. It says, Cain was a tiller of the ground. The Bible is talking about how the first murderer was also the first farmer. And in the 25th verse, it makes it clear that Abel, the brother who was not the farmer, was the one who loved God the most. So what, I said. It's a classic archetype of the oldest child being the most beloved, but also the one who screws up. It's all over, from Greek mythology to Shakespeare. Don't you see, Clark said? Adam and Eve were gatherers like we are now. They walked around the Garden of Eden and picked up food. But then they tasted of the knowledge of good and evil, of life and death. That's your food supply. You live or die by it. When you live as a gatherer, you live by a whim of nature. If there's no food, you die. When you begin to store up food, you can defy nature and survive a drought. You then have the power to control life, the knowledge of life or death, or good and evil. So the tasting of the apple must have meant that Adam and Eve experimented with agriculture, and in doing so, they defied the God of nature. It's a warning. It's saying that the primitive life of hunting, gathering, and herding was more in accord with nature's way than is agriculture. Clark dove deep into the issue, but I didn't consider it all that important at the time. I couldn't see how when people started farming after the end of the Ice Age, it had been such a bad thing. After all, it brought us modern society and science. Clark, however, was totally certain that agriculture and what he called the organized ones were responsible for the coming death of the earth. The book, The Prophet's Way.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of being joined in studio by my friend Michael Leidy, the Executive Director of National Nurses.
Oh, we shouldn't say that. Director of Public Policy.
Director of Public Policy. I even looked to make sure, but the Director of Public Policy of National Nurses United. And, you know, I always say, if the nurses aren't involved, I don't want to be there because y'all are really just at the forefront of so much. Also, whenever there's a protest or anything, it's way more fun when the nurses are there because y'all know how to take a moment, build a movement, and push for change. So I'm interested in what you're in town for right now. What are the nurses doing in D.C.?
Well, we've got a couple hundred nurses, Alex, who are running around Capitol Hill lobbying senators on Medicare for All. When Senator Sanders introduces his bill, we want co-sponsors on that bill. We believe that if you're a Democrat, you should support Medicare for All, period. And then we're also on the House side where we're lobbying for John Conyers' H.R. 676, which has 108 co-sponsors, a majority of the Democratic caucus. So they're getting the message over there in the People's House that this is a bottom line issue, especially for Democrats, but more broadly than that, independents and Republicans increasingly. And then we're also lobbying on a bill that we did in California to great success where we limit the number of patients each nurse takes care of. And that has major impacts on the quality of care in hospitals. And so those are our two priorities. We're also working on VA collective bargaining rights, pushing back on their privatization schemes, and making sure that nurses have adequate protections when they are handling patients, when they lift them and so forth. So we get some of the technical nurse issues. And of course, there's always the Robin Hood tax, which we fundamentally need so that Wall Street funds human needs, not just their own greed. So
yes. And I get made fun of a lot by these guys because they say that like in Blues Brothers, when the band says, oh, we play all types of music, country and Western. They say I'm like that with Social Security and Medicare.
Oh, right.
But you know what? When I talk about it, the phone lines light up because people do care about this, and I'm only getting gentle ribbing from them. But I spend a lot of time talking about Medicare and talking about the failures of the for-profit health industry. That actually that the root cause of the problems is the for-profit aspect of it.
Right.
That is, as long as that's left there, you'll only have shades of terrible, right? It's like if you leave them totally unfettered, they will just let people die for profit. That's it. But you could then regulate them, and then you're like, well, you can't let everyone die for profit, and they'll just let some people, right? Like until you fundamentally excise that whole thing and get to healthcare as a right for everyone in this country, we will be left with these stories. And, you know, the callers call in, and I mean, you know, this across this country, people have these horror stories of just what happens in our current non-system, where because it's not a healthcare delivery system. Nurses have to fight against a system in order to deliver care too often. Because the system is set up to make money.
That's right. That's right. And it's fundamentally the difference between an industry model and a caregiving model. And we, of course, the nurses come from a caregiving perspective. And you're absolutely right. The industry model says we're going to enhance revenues. And the notion that there's competition is actually not true, because each industry player benefits from the current system, because as the revenues go up, they all make a bigger profit. So, yeah, so pharma will charge more. The insurance companies are willing to pay it because their premiums go up. Their percentage of profit goes up, and the hospitals will pay it too because they can just build on a charge on top of what the drug companies are. So the notion that they're in competition is actually false. Pharma is basically a dividend machine for Wall Street. The insurance companies have antitrust protections, and the hospitals are encouraged to consolidate in order to gain market leverage. That's a system where prices rise, costs go up, consumers, patients, in our view, pay more, and workers are shafted by their employers shifting the cost to them. And it's all driven by that exact revenue model. Even the nonprofits act like for-profit.
Right.
So that's the insidiousness of it. It almost doesn't matter in our nurses' perspective whether they work for a for-profit or a nonprofit, because they treat them the same. Now, it's true you can see studies where the for-profit providers actually have worse outcomes. But you can also see that this profit system is pervasive, and it prevents nurses from practicing as they were educated to do. And precisely on your point about the delivery changes, because they don't do Medicare for all, because they don't finance it publicly and save money by putting everyone in the risk pool, one risk pool, eliminating the profits and executive salaries of the insurers, limiting what pharma can gouge us, right, and lower those prescription drug prices. They don't do any of that. So guess what? They turn to the nurses and say, hey, we want you to get this patient out of the hospital. Right. We want you to, practice according to this guideline, regardless of whether it's in the best interest of the patient.
Right.
All those delivery changes are driven by the fact they didn't save money on the finance side.
So I have a theme that I talk about, because resisting Trump, opposing Trump is so important, and we will, and we're going to just keep doing that. But we actually only lose when we forget what we're fighting for. And I will admit I fought for Obamacare because I wanted to expand Medicaid. That's definitely the best part of Obamacare. Expanding Medicaid helps real people. People's lives are improved by it. I also, though, and I was talking with Richard R.J. Eskow, and I admitted that the thing that I bought or the mistake that I made, I didn't believe that Democrats would actually ever be like, oh, well, this is the end. This is what now we got it.
Right.
I was like, no, obviously not. But this is a step towards single payer. And I want to expand Medicaid. I want to expand Medicare. I want to create one system, get rid of the different tiers, and eliminate the private industry. And of course, the Democrats have fought for generations. Their North Star was Medicare for everybody, right? I mean,
you were younger then, right, Alex?
I was. But it really did shock me in a way, because I heard it like, no, we're not going to, single payer is not possible. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you aiming at then?
Right.
If you don't have the North Star of healthcare as a right, if that's not what you're walking towards, like, where are you walking?
That's right.
You allow the insurance companies, big hospital, big insurance, big pharma, are driving the bus. Unless you're aimed at healthcare as a right.
That's right.
And so I will tell you that I will never again be fooled into thinking that it is obvious that these steps towards Medicare for everybody are obvious steps for everyone. So I go out of my way. And there has to be an understanding that what we're fighting for is a fundamental, a radical restructuring of healthcare in this country, not the industry, not right. And if I can take a moment because it's fun, it comes up often. They're like, well, what about the insurance industry? What about all? And I'm like, I'm not that worried about them. Right. We have plans to do, we will figure out some things to do. But in point of fact, get rid of them.
That's right. Well, they're all administrators. The growth in healthcare jobs has been administration jobs. Right? And the insurers are the worst force in the market because they're the ones forcing the hospitals and the doctors' offices to deal with them.
Right.
And so you're right. I mean, the whole notion that we're going to lose jobs is false. We did a study in 2009 that showed if you just put people in existing Medicare, don't restructure it as we want because we need to improve it, not just expand it, but just put everyone in Medicare, net 2.6 million jobs.
Yeah.
After you account for the loss in the insurance industry, we're going to shift from administrators to clinicians. Isn't that a good thing?
Exactly. To caregivers.
Exactly. From industry to caregiving, exactly.
And imagine if, every doctor's office didn't have, 5 jobs. They're literally just to argue with the insurers, right?
The 300 people they have to deal with each month. In Canada, for example, Medicare for All is like Canada in some respect, many fundamental respects. The doctor's offices get paid once a month or twice a month.
Wow.
And they get
that's it.
And that's it. That's all the billing they do.
So what else are you working on? Are we as a movement, should we be focused on? Because you aim, here's the North Star, you're working on the California single payer.
That's right.
Working on federal single payer at the same time.
That's right.
We also have to take on the big pharma, just directly take them on. We need to do all of this as we march towards Medicare for everybody, single payer healthcare in this country. What other fights are happening right now?
Well, the key fight is obviously in California, around SB 562, because that is a state-like Medicare for All program. That if we can do it in the biggest state in the country, we can obviously do it in the rest of the country. And the fact that other economies of comparable size to California have done it suggests we can do it in California. So that really is a key fight. But I think also, though, we've got to broaden the fight just from our nurses' perspective beyond just healthcare. Because when you talk about healthcare, you're talking about justice. You're talking about equality. You're talking about the fundamentals of our society that need correction. So, for example, you got the Nobel laureate Angus Deaton saying healthcare is the biggest driver of inequality. He's a mainstream economist. So we want to tackle inequality in all of its aspects. That means the Robin Hood tax on Wall Street, because Wall Street is the driver of inequality along with healthcare. But healthcare is actually part of finance. They build the hospitals. They dividends from pharma. The insurers are obviously part of the insurance finance complex. So all of that means taking on Wall Street means taking on those industries that are driving inequality and injustice. And what the Robin Hood tax would do, sponsored by Keith Ellison and Senator Sanders, would generate $320 billion a year for human needs programs. That's how you fund Medicare for All. But not just fund it, you change social priorities. You change the concept of what a society and government can do for people. Because ultimately, that's what we're fighting. We're fighting on when the Republicans do a health care bill, it just turns into a tax reform bill.
Right.
We're fighting that government is the problem. And so what we have to do, and healthcare is, again, a great entree to this, no, we're all in this together. And nurses don't discriminate. They don't discriminate when their patients appear. And that principle should govern not only healthcare, but society. So the fights we want to take on are precisely those. Where are those things that we can fight for, like a Robin Hood tax, like Medicare for All, like increased patient safety in the hospitals, but also then what does that say about the broader movement, right, that we're building on? And we say also that when you look at healthcare and compare the U.S. to other countries, the disparities based on race come to the fore as the large explanation for why people live shorter lives in America than the rest of the industrialized world who have national health care.
We're going to keep this conversation with Michael Leidy going right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick with us. We have more of a great conversation with Michael Lighty just after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Staying with us in studio, Michael Lighty with National Nurses United. We are going to go to a call. Let's see if we got Bill. Bill in Washington State. You're on the line with me and Michael Lighty.
Hello, Mr. Lawson. It's good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Bill.
And the nurse, what was your name?
Michael. Bill, how are you?
Michael. Hey, very well, thank you. Yeah, I was going to talk about setting up a national website for registered voters, but since I'm talking to a union nurse, that's even better. I mean, the simple answer is cut out the prescription advertising on television and shift that proven amount of advertising budget right into prescription reductions and nurses' pay and machinery that relieves your back so you don't all come out crippled of your nursing career.
Well, Bill, somebody who knows the day-to-day reality of nurses, that's great.
I have a sister that's a nurse and one that's a pharmacist. So, yeah, and I've heard, you guys, yeah, you're the workhorses. The doctors are kind of a bunch of Donald Trumps, and then you got the nurses doing the
Well,
work.
you said that, not me.
Well, no, I don't mean that across the board. That's kind of cruel, actually.
But Bill, I think you're just on the point on the prescription drugs. I agree with you. We got to get rid of direct-to-consumer marketing, but I just will say that that's not nearly enough. That is a very small step in the right direction. And again, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not going to go. We have to remember what we're looking for. And when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs, we need to radically revision the entire concept of how we do it. These patent-granted monopolies to the most profitable industry in the world, the pharmaceutical industries, all they're doing is they're taking publicly funded patents, right? We pay for it. We give it to them. Then they charge us the highest prices in the world. And what it means is it's a tax on people who need those drugs. The high prices. So a person who needs chemotherapy is taxed by the high price of chemotherapy. It is just a fundamentally wrong way of doing this. And we need a much more public system. We need a radical revisioning of the entire pharmaceutical industry. That was a statement kind of question.
Well, I agree with you, obviously. And you're right. Because they're such a driver of increasing costs, because they're essentially another publicly subsidized industry that then generates profits for Wall Street, we have to take that public resource back. And the notion that they spend more money, as you know, on marketing than they do on research, that the basic research is actually done by the government institutes, and the research they do is basically, let's change a molecule and repatent the thing so we can have another 20 years of profit. So all that has to be fundamentally changed. It's not enough to simply reform the FDA. You have to reform fundamentally the crony capitalist relationship between pharma and the government.
Exactly.
And the corruption of that. I would say, to Bill's point, though, we dealt with Prop 61 in California, which the industry ended up spending
I have about 20 seconds.
But anyway, advertising drives editorial policy to some extent. So that is a factor against us politically.
Definitely is. And we need to take on big pharma, just like big hospital and big insurance, because they're all Wall Street. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, continuing to fill in for Tom, who is working on a climate change documentary, sends me beautiful pictures from Norway. And I'm continuing studio with me is Michael Lighty from National Nurses United. And, you know, this moment We agree, and I love working with the nurses.
We love working with you, Alex.
And it's really fun because I usually, like, if there's an idea, it's like, oh, well, we should do something on Medicare. And I'm like, well, I should call Michael. Because as soon as Social Security works and the nurses are on it, I know that no one's going to be like, well, maybe a public-private path is the way to go, right? Or maybe the pharmaceutical industry isn't that bad.
That's right.
And
just transparency, right?
Exactly, just more transparency, and that fundamentally the fight is for justice, right. And that is at the base of all of this. And it's heartening when you are in these big crowds of people and you realize, oh man, it's not just me. I'm not the only one who thinks this. And the corporate media, the propagandists of the billionaires, they want to split us up. They want us to feel alone. They don't want us to understand that there are millions of people around this country who believe what we believe that justice is the path forward, believe that the billionaires on Wall Street need to be held to account, and that it is possible, that we have the power. Right. And so one of the things that I know you're working on that really I think is incredibly important, I went last year, is the People's Summit. So it's coming up in Chicago, and it's just a physical gathering space to see and to understand and to get organized, which I always call the most radical act. But I have two superlatives. I also say the most radical act you can take is self-care, right. And the most radical act you can take is get organized. Sometimes it's the same thing.
That's
Knowing that you're not alone is actually self-care. So just tell us about the People's Summit, what you're working on there, how people can get involved.
Well, the People's Summit is an extraordinary event because it is not just a gathering where you're going to learn techniques. So I'm not just going to learn how to write an email that will be clickbait. I'm actually going to just understand political ideology and the difference between, say, what we call neoliberalism and a real vision of society that's based on multiracial economic justice. And that difference of vision is just, to your point, Alex, what are we fighting for? If we are fighting to preserve the status quo or restore the status quo, that's what got us here, is the status quo. So the only way to get out of where we are is to go forward with an alternative vision. We often hear about democratic values, but we never hear what they are. But we're very clear in the summit what those are: justice, solidarity, equality, and action. So that's what the summit provides. Yeah, there are going to be well-known celebrities who are going to be there, and that will be a way to understand activism and also inspire people, because they like well-known people, who agree with them. But really the heart of it is political education, strategies at a regional level, educating elected officials who come there with the politics, not just techniques. And that's really what we bring to it. We're going to do the People Speak, which is a dramatic reading of from the Howard Zinn book on the people's history of the United States. Really powerful stuff. And so we have that kind of also component to it, the cultural component, is huge social media, a podcast row, lots of media attention there. Free Speech TV is participating. So we're very excited about all of that. But the heart of it is just what you say. How do we describe our vision? How do we organize for our vision? And how do we get beyond silos?
Is it peoplesummit.org?
It's peoplesummit.org. And the key component of it is it's like a political party where people who find themselves with similar politics but working on different issues come together and break out those silos.
Michael Leidy, National Nurses United. Check it out, peoplesummit.org. Get organized, get involved. It's up to us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Check out peoplesummit.org to find out more about how you can get involved.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And this is from page 180. The subhead is, the title is What We Need to Remember. The chapter title, the subhead is The Slavery, Losing Your Freedom of Civilization. In 1861, Mark Twain rode the railroad and overland stage across much of the United States, documenting his journey in a book, Roughing It, published in 1871. During a stagecoach ride near the Great Salt Lake, he encountered a group of the Shoshone-speaking Native Americans called the Ghost Suite. often referred to then by whites as the Digger Indians. Twain considered them, quote, the wretchedest type of mankind I have ever seen, end quote, and wrote, quote, they produce nothing at all. They have no villages, no gatherings together into strictly defined tribal communities, a people whose only shelter is a rag cast on a bush to keep off a portion of the snow, and yet who inhabit one of the most rocky, wintry, repulsive wastes that our country or any other man can exhibit. The Bushmen and the Gashoots are manifestly descended from the self-same gorilla or kangaroo or Norway rat, whichever animal Adam the Darwinians trace them to, end of quote. Even to this day, many people who have not bothered to study the Shoshone or other hunter-gatherer people imagine them in much of the same way Mark Twain did. Books and movies over the years have implied that their lives must be a continuous wretched struggle to find food from day to day, and that their cultures and religions hardly qualify as either. In that belief, however, Twain and many modern people are wrong. If the highest goal of contemporary civilization is to have leisure time, free from the demands of providing for food and shelter, so that one may then contemplate the great mysteries of life, then the Shoshone had achieved the pinnacle of success. Our culture teaches that civilizations like city-states come about as a result of technological innovation, such as agriculture, giving people more free time. With this free time, the story goes, they produce art, literature, religion, and explore the cosmos. Primitive cultures don't have these things because they don't have the time for them. In fact, these represent two of our most deadly myths. Leisure time. Every empirical study of both historic and contemporary cultures finds that the more complex and hierarchical a culture is, the harder the people in it must work and the more frantic their lives are. Just look at how many hours a week the average middle management executive works, about 60, and how many families have two 40-hour-per-week workers devoting 80 hours a week to paying the mortgage and feeding the family. Only a very small class of people within the city-state enjoys the leisure time state of freedom, its economic and political rulers. And because the ruling class is not producing food, those who are food producers must spend extra time making food for those who are not. The Shoshone require the same average 2,000 calories of food energy every day as do any other humans. However, they expend on average only 2 hours a day to acquire it, because they were a nomadic people who moved from place to place following their food supply. As the seasons changed and food became scarce in one place, they simply moved to another. If one food wasn't available, they knew where and how to find another. Toronto University professor Richard Lee found that the similarly structured tribal group, the Kung of the Kalahari Desert in Africa, spend less than 15 hours a week, 2 hours a day, attending to gathering food and the other necessities of life. The rest of the time, he said, they played, told stories, and made music. John Yellen of the National Science Foundation found the same to be true of the Hottentots, another hunter-gatherer group in Africa. The Shoshone had an elaborate and meaningful culture and religion. They generally did not suffer from famines or plagues. They had lived comfortably and happily on their land for at least several thousand, perhaps as many as 10,000 years, keeping the land as clean and pure and productive as it could be in that desert and mountain region, living harmoniously with their neighbors. At the time Mark Twain took his ride through their territory, the Shoshone had accomplished over 1,000 years a second achievement, which is regularly touted by our leaders as the highest goal of humankind. They had eliminated warfare. There was not even a word for war in their language. The Shoshone lived a tribal life in one of the most desolate parts of North America, with a population density that ranged from one person every 50 square miles to one person every 100 square miles. A typical tribal unit was a single extended family of 5 to 20 people, and they traveled at a leisurely pace across a wide area. On those rare occasions when others, including whites, came to attack them, they simply ran away and hid. The occasions for attack were rare, largely because the Shoshone accumulated no wealth. They had no systems for preserving and storing food, minerals, or anything other than what they could carry. In this regard, they were not poor. Their lives were comfortable, their family interactions meaningful, and their food supply ample. A symbol of this is found in the highest status act a Shoshone could commit in the presence of others, to give them what he had. Generosity is how one achieves social standing among the Shoshone, whereas the accumulation and control of surplus food and possessions were how whites achieved social status. They were called the diggers by whites because they often dug in the ground for roots and food. Whites assumed this implied some sort of agricultural stupidity, but in fact the Shoshone had a deep and rich knowledge of life in their environment, both above and below the ground. They used a sacred digging stick to extract food, It was both manufactured and transported with ritual and ceremony. If a stone had to be moved, a different type of stick was used. When a Shoshone looked out at the natural world, she saw a landscape rich with life, both visible and hidden. That life was known to her, called to her, spoke to her, and often guided her. Last Hours of Ancient Thought.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. Always a pleasure to get to talk with Michael Leidy. National Nurses United are just a true champion in the struggle. You really can't overstate how important the work that the nurses do are. And I just hope everyone takes a look at peoplesummit.org, gets involved in the fight for Medicare for all. If you're in California, the fight for Medicare for single payer in California, which is the sixth largest economy in the world, so clearly has the resources to pull off single payer, to put the lie to the rest of the country that, we need the private insurers when in fact they're just rent-seeking, parasitic middlemen who extract money from the system and deny care. That is, fundamentally revisioning just across the board. So just moving from this sort of extractive money out of everything. Everything should be looked at as a profit center. People included should only be seen as a profit center, to a justice-oriented movement, to a justice-oriented country, to a justice-oriented world. Racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice. Justice is the watchword that is going to unite us as a movement through solidarity. And all of the things that I always bring up on this show. So it's a real pleasure to talk to Michael and hear what the nurses are in town fighting for. And, we're going to keep these fights going. Medicare for all, we're going to take on big pharma. We're going to lower drug prices. And we have to do them all at once. And we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And remember that we don't have to do everything ourselves, though. So it is a relay race, and it's solidarity that's going to unite us into that movement. So I'm going to take out the rest of the show. I'm going to try to get to all of you on the phone, as many as I can, starting with Chaz in Washington State. You're on the line.
Can you hear me all right, Alex?
I can, Chaz. Thanks for calling.
All right. I just wanted to, first of all, point out, I don't know if you noticed last night on Washington Post, a headline that says that all of Trump's campaign statements just vanished from his website.
I did not notice that.
Yeah,
Maybe he doesn't understand how the internet works.
That's funny because that's exactly what the rest of the article says. But the reason I'm calling is because I've heard people complain for years that, hey, the liberals are not like the conservatives. We got to fight them. And well, that's not the way liberals and progressives are. We like to think that the meek will inherit the earth, but we took a setback, say, January 20th of this year. And I'm starting to think that, we need to hammer away at this injustice where we see it, time to put on your cape. And so to that end, I've tweeted a Trumpistan entry every day since Donald Trump was inaugurated. God, that sentence drives me crazy. I wonder if I could do a little shameless self-promotion.
Go for it, Chaz.
Thank you, sir. If people want to go to Twitter and search for Chaz, C-H-A-S, Trumpistan, they'll see that every single day I've found a different way that Donald Trump has just cut away at this beloved thing we call democracy. And I just worry that some kid is going to do an essay in the future that says America died by 1,000 cuts, and these are the cuts that Donald Trump is doing.
Chaz, it's an incredibly important point. The 1,000 cuts, or the slow creep of tyranny, of fascism, of corporate rule, of Wall Street rule. It is through that slow creep that that things can happen, and so we need that huge things can happen, and it's sort of like before our eyes, but it happens slowly, so we didn't notice, and that's why we do need, you know, as many people like you watching, truth telling, getting the word out. So Chaz, thank you for everything that you do. Remember, get organized, get organized, get organized. And it's important for each of us to do our part and plug in to organizations and efforts that are happening around the country all the time. I'm going to take another call from Benjamin in Missouri. I think Missouri?
No, Mississippi.
I'm sorry, Benjamin. Benjamin in Mississippi.
Yeah, you don't have to show me. Anyway,
that was a good one.
Yeah, you had said earlier when you were talking about somebody being arrested for their voices, you said the people were afraid of their voices and want to take them away, their voices away from them, I guess, when they were arrested or something.
Mm-hmm.
Does that go for Berkeley as well?
Say that again.
Does that go for the University of California at Berkeley as well? When people come there and they shut down their voices, are you afraid? Are you fearful for, you know, any of their voices being taken away, or is it just for people that, you know, that certain people agree with?
Oh,
it goes both ways.
So I love this chance to discuss with you. So first of all, I think that everyone should get to speak, right? Like if the college wants to have someone speak, they can speak. I also like people are able to speak their outrage as well, right? So you can have a protest. People, free speech is for everybody, and no one has a constitutional right to have, the ability to be paid by a college to give a talk or anything. You're not talking free speech at that level. Free speech, do you understand that? That free speech is only about, does the government or agents of the government actually quash the speech? So I would hope that, I let Ann Coulter.
So as an individual could quash somebody, since I'm not part of the government, I could go burn down some sort of building that somebody's going to speak in and say that's okay because I'm not involved with the government.
No, because that would be arson and you'd be burning down somebody else's property. What you could do, though, if you didn't like the speech that someone was giving, is you could stand outside on a public sidewalk or whatever, and you could give a speech. That's freedom of speech.
That's what's going on. I think that's what I'm talking about, is the destruction and the violence that people, that do not agree with that are committing. But what I really had called in, I wanted to just make a point that the last two minority leaders had said basically that Comey should resign, and they had no trust in him. And then in fact, Tom Brokaw just was on MSNBC a little while ago, and he said he didn't know of one person that thought Jim Comey was doing a good job.
Yeah, Benjamin, let me stop you right there. I'll tell you, because I get down with your repetition of talking points, but it's really simple. So I'll explain it to you. I am happy that Comey lost his job because I don't want him to have that job. I am not concerned with Comey being fired. I am concerned with Comey being fired to obstruct the investigation into Donald Trump and his associates. See, it's really easy. Both ethically and legally, motives matter. Okay? Do you understand that concept? That concept is important. Motives matter. So when Donald Trump fired Comey to obstruct the investigation into himself and his associates, that is very concerning. That is why everyone is concerned. Now, if you want to, buy his explanation, I think his explanation is bought by true believers and 5-year-olds across the country. But You don't have to go to liberals to find people saying that on its face, his quote-unquote justification. Look at his letter. What was the second paragraph in there? But Burr has said it. Sass has said it. McCain has said it. Graham has said it. This is not about Comey, qua Comey. It's about firing Comey to obstruct the investigation into potential criminality in Trump land. Does that make sense to you?
Can I get something in now? Okay, first of all, there is no formal investigation as I understand it. And
well, you understand it wrong. There are two investigations.
Can I finish, please? Can I finish, please?
I mean, I don't have to let you finish. I could just drop you off. But
I'm asking.
I will let you. I will let you finish.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The fact that you're saying that he was fired for that is basically your opinion, and your opinion only.
Okay. So I mean, if you want to buy it, Benjamin, that's fine. But I'm not going to waste my time arguing with you about it. Donald Trump, literally no one believes that. No one believes what you're saying. No one believes Donald Trump. No one believes that Donald Trump fired Jim Comey because of Jim Comey's handling of Hillary Clinton's emails, okay? It's a ridiculous farce, and it's an insult to pretend that, that's just your opinion, that you don't accept this nonsensical, farcical 5-year-old came up with this distraction. Donald Trump went to the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General and said, find me reasons to fire Jim Comey because I'm mad about Russia. Just do the research. It's been reported. It will continue to be reported. That's why he was fired. That's why people are concerned. If you don't get it, it's because you're trying very hard not to get it. So, Benjamin, thank you so much for your call. Armin in Florida, you're on the line.
I'd like to comment about what you're just talking about with the orange baboon, otherwise known as Trump. And then I'd like to comment about health care, Medicare, real quick, if I may, please.
Do it.
And I think Trump thinks in his demented mind that the race is on for him to, by force or by innuendo or by bribery or collusion or, threats, to convert Hillary's financial owners to his side and to integrate them with his force that he wants to dream about having for the globe, because I think he's out of control right now. Or will they convert him and destroy him? That's what the fight's really about. The power people at the top of the apex of the pyramid, the ones that really run everything, that have too much power, because for too many years our Congress, both sides of the aisle, has acted like a tag team and sold out the majority of the people that are out of the power inner circle for the greater good of the Billionaires Club advancing. And then I'd like to comment on health care, if I may.
Go ahead.
My philosophy is Jesus, the great Christian, for all these people out here that claim they're Christian, I totally believe in my heart that Jesus would pick Medicare over profits for private billionaires. I really believe he would, to the point in which you were saying about economics and finances and everything. We've got health care for some, like the Dick Cheneys and the Bushes and the presidents and their administrations, that 99.99% of us will never get the access to that technology. And they always use that exception of the great Bethesda and the great health care and the advancements like everybody else has access to it in this country. They hold it up in a false premise that it's superior to the world. It's better than the socialized countries, and it's so great. And the biggest lie is they know it when they're telling it, to distort reality and to snooker the people out there that are too damn stupid to understand it, that it's just used to keep us down and to protect the elite the way they do, unjustifiably, unconstitutionally, and we don't even get access to it. And they do it to make people think Well, we don't want to go to a socialized system that gives everybody something, that gives everybody the basics. I mean, my God, look at what we got now. We got 50 million people that really don't have health care, that really don't have access to it. And another point I want to make, that the Republicans are supposed to be the champions of the private sector and the private system and the free market and all this other stuff. Those bastards, and I'm saying a word, a cuss word, those bastards in the House.
I'm sorry, Armin. Swearing on the air is never going to be a way of being able to continue your point. That is not even in my control. So you were just dropped off. Armin, thanks for your point. Everybody, remember, you can't swear on radio. And Armin's point that the billionaires get, the health care, and that if you're not a billionaire, the fact that billionaires have access to the greatest advancements in medical science really does you no good. So we shouldn't be using the level of care that billionaires get as our metric. And in fact, we should be building a system that delivers care for everybody, a system based on justice, a system that moves away from the concept of industry, of making money from people's health and sickness. And that's the making money from people being sick. Think of how immoral that is, to a system based on justice. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More on the Thom Hartmann Program coming right up. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson filling in. We're going to go to Mark in Arizona. You're on the line.
Hey, thanks, Alex, for taking my call. Appreciate it. First thing first, from someone who's on the left, it's really true regarding politics and I guess religion, too. You can't reason someone out of a position that they didn't use reason to get into. It makes it very difficult to have intellectual debate with people on the right a lot,
Yeah, I mean, and some people, they're not, the guy who called in before, he wasn't looking to debate or anything. He was trying to do their normal, talking point, lay a trap and pretend that he is some sort of, paragon of I would have had that free speech argument actually with him. It's almost interesting because I really do think that infringement on free speech is such a danger. I would have loved to have that. But when he went to, do you know how hard you have to try to believe the bogus explanation on why they fired Comey? I mean, I wasn't going to debate that because at that point it was clear he was just, he was making it up. He was trying to be obtuse on that. So, Mark, back to your point. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about, the people who are being arrested for demonstrating, on the left, and usually lawfully, or at least in a lot of cases lawfully. My curiosity is, and I don't know anything about this, and people listening might be in a better position to do this, but are there GoFundMe accounts, organizations setting these types of accounts that, people on the left that can contribute to, that will be used exclusively for protesters that find themselves in these situations? Are there any organizations, networks, even perhaps the DNC, for heaven's sake, might even want to take that one on, but anything like that about?
One, I don't think the DNC's taken that one on. Maybe they will, but that's pretty optimistic. I have seen individual, GoFundMes and individual efforts. Some of the things I've seen that are really heartening. Some amazing lawyers, like big lawyers, stepping up pro bono to represent people. And I have seen individual GoFundMes. But it's a great point. I can't say definitively, but I haven't seen a sort of movement-wide. And I think that would be something that is incredibly useful. And especially because I think that free speech is really under threat right now. Like, they are sending up trial balloons, and you know, what can they get away with? And we can't let them get away with anything.
Yeah, I'd like to see a massive effort to back these people up legally and financially. And we're talking about not just legal fees, but lost wages too, you know, in a lot of cases. So, you know, and that would embolden people to step out and protest and get themselves out there when they may not otherwise, because they, you know, a couple of days lost wages could mean, you know, a loss of a lot of things in a lot of cases.
Mark, it's a great point. It really is a great point. And, you know, the converse maybe of that point is the chilling effect that people seeing that they might get arrested and lose a few days of lost wages, plus fees, plus lawyers, and maybe they would have turned out to raise their voice against injustice, but they decided that they couldn't risk their family and personal well-being in that way. So a way of dealing with that movement-wide is a great idea. Mark, thank you for your call. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. Armin, if you're still listening, we're highly debating whether the auto program, the high-tech program that monitors for cussing, was too sharp on that one. So I hope you call back tomorrow. But if we don't get close to the line, we don't have to worry about it. And Armin, I just want to mainly say that your point was really good. That's why I was sad to not be able to have a back and forth with you. Your point being that the billionaire class, that the global plutocrats have been winning for the last 30 years in an outrageous restructuring of the globe to hoover up all of the resources, to create levels of inequality that are staggering, that are destabilizing the world, so that a handful have as much as 50% of the population of the globe. That is a system that is unsustainable. That is a system that demands, by its own existence, a radical change. That is what we are called to do. That is why we will raise our voices together. That is why we will stand in the street together. We will call our members of Congress. We will write letters. We will go to town halls. We will host town halls. We'll run for office ourselves. We'll help our neighbors, our family, and everyone to see that together we can build a country that works for us, for everybody. And that is what we're going to do together. I'm Alex Lawson. Thank you for joining me on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'll be back tomorrow.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.